Good morning, Commissioners, Chief Moore, Mr. Tiefenk, Madam Secretary, Mr. City Attorney Carlos de la Guerra, and members of the public. Today is January 31st, 2023. It's 9:30 a.m. This is a special meeting of the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Good morning, Commissioner Briggs.
Present.
Commissioner Decker to join us shortly. Commissioner Bonner.
Here.
Commissioner Kalanche.
Here.
And Commissioner Sobroff.
Here.
Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. Also present, we have the Executive Director, the Chief of Police, and the City Attorney. Mr. President.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We welcome everyone attending this morning. All public comment will be heard during item 2 on the agenda. We will dedicate a total of 45 minutes to public comment. Members of the public will have 1 minute per agenda item, or maximum of 2 minutes total. At the request of the speaker will be given 1 additional minute for general public comment, for a maximum of 3 minutes total. Members of the public who participate in public comment are reminded that they can speak to any item on the agenda or a matter within the jurisdiction of the Board of Police Commissioners. Public comment is your opportunity to address the board, so you are free to express your opinion on matters before the board and to generally express when you disagree with other opinions expressed. However, directing your comments to other individuals who have spoken or attacking others who have expressed their opinion shall be deemed off topic, and your public comment period will be concluded. Members of the public, if you choose to participate in the public comment portion of the agenda, you can participate in the meeting in one of a number of ways that are outlined on the agenda. At this time, we're going to go to item 1 on the agenda, the report of the Chief of Police. Good morning, Chief Moore.
Good morning, Commissioner President Briggs, Commissioner Bonner, Commissioner Kalanche, Commissioner Sobroff, Mr. City Attorney, the Executive Director, Mr. Tiefenk. And as I do each week, I'm going to briefly discuss our COVID-19 update. This last week, we saw 34 additional cases of COVID-19. That's a 10% increase from the week before, which that number was 31. Of the 34 new cases, 29 were individuals that had been fully vaccinated. That is an 85% rate of infection of persons who are vaccinated this last week. We have 106 personnel that are home recovering from this virus. There are 13 long COVID cases. That's an improvement of 1 from my previous report. That is an increase of 33 as far as the number of people are at home this week, and that just again goes to the ebb and flow of new cases. I'm grateful that there's no hospitalizations of any of our COVID-19 cases. In regards to events, while we attended a number of events, including the Chinese New Year celebration and a cadet graduation, I want to center my remarks on two primary issues I think of the greatest importance. First, as a department, I sent a letter to the family of the Nichols, of Tyree Nichols. His death, tragically at the hands of a brutal assault, the grotesque video that we saw was unimaginable for me as I witnessed and observed it on Friday. And that personal correspondence was to extend, again, just the heartfelt feelings of loss and frustration and anger that his death occurred at the hands of these police officers. I want to thank and recognize the prompt action of Memphis Police Chief C.J. Davis, a person who I have great respect for and that I've had conversations with over these last 2 weeks regarding this terrible incident, as well as the District Attorney's Office and the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation for their prompt investigation and for the filing of criminal charges against the actions or involving the actions of these 5 individuals. This investigation there, of course, continues, and I'm continuing to monitor reports about additional personnel that are being identified as to their actions or inactions at that event. But let me just stress that as a member of this profession for 4 decades, I have never seen such a clear and violent abuse of authority and just unexcusable. And I am grateful that the criminal justice system is moving promptly, while also recognizing that our men and women of this department are unified in that work, as well as the Los Angeles Police Protective League and others. There's no place for this, and it's just unimaginable in 21st century policing that this would happen. I also want to extend my appreciation to the number of civic leaders, community advocates, elected leaders, and others across the Los Angeles region, as across the country, who have called out these this injustice, then has also called for nonviolent demonstration of people's anger and frustration. And this weekend, I am grateful that those calls, as well as the community that recognized how wrong these actions were, came out vocally and provide demonstrations and marches here in Los Angeles, both on Friday and Saturday, and to a lesser degree on Sunday. And were largely, by the vast majority, peaceful. There was instances on Friday night in regards to an incident here at headquarters where officers stood in a breach as individuals began to vandalize the building. But officers were able to restore order and disperse that group without having to resort to any type of force that resulted in any injuries to officers or others. They demonstrated great restraint in the face of some very vile and very anger remarks insulting to them. On Saturday, there was a protest in the Hollywood area where a relatively small group of people demonstrated and marched around that neighborhood as a business community there, an entertainment community. Our officers were effective in monitoring those actions and facilitating those marches and demonstrations and the expressions that were made. However, in the course of that demonstration in the hours, there was individuals who did commit active vandalism, primarily a spray painting of graffiti, as well as some windows that were broken in 9 separate businesses. Our officers and their tactics worked, identifying the individuals responsible, arresting those individuals, including the recovery of evidence, including spray paint, as well as devices, tools that were used to smash or break shatter those windows. And we'll continue to hold those individuals accountable while we also facilitate the expression that as America grieves in regards to this failure that occurred in Memphis. Secondly, I want to talk about a triple homicide that occurred on the west side on the morning of Saturday the 28th at about 2:30 in the morning. 911 calls on the 2700 block of Ellison. What I can report to the public is that Robbery Homicide Division was mobilized and more than 30 detectives responded to that scene and are conducting an extensive and exhaustive investigation. Tragically, the lives of 3 young women were lost. Anian Hutton, an aspiring actress, rap artist, and music promoter, was one that was killed, murdered in their vehicle. Second one was Neelan Davis, a young single mother with 3 young children, an 8-year-old girl, a 7-year-old boy, and a 1-year-old baby girl. And Destiny Sims was the third victim, and also a single mother with 3 children, a 6-year-old boy, a 5-year-old, and a 1-year-old baby girl. These tragic loss of life, as well as 4 additional victims, shattered a sense of calm and peace in that neighborhood. And our investigation will reach as far as necessary to identify the individuals that we believe committed this act in a targeted assault. This was not a random assault. We believe that the investigation by investigative leads that we have to this point, that we will identify the person or persons responsible, and that this was an act not in pursuit of a robbery or some random act, but instead a targeted assault and a vicious vicious expression of violence and a terrible loss of life. Moving forward, there was no categorical use of force during this period, and that holds us at 3 officer-involved shootings year to date. The same period last year, that number was also 3. We've had 2 of those officer-involved shootings that have previously reported on that were fatal. That number last year at this time was 0. In regards to our crime picture, despite this triple homicide and the multi-victim shooting here in the West LA area, overall, we continue to see a downward trend in our violence and overall Part 1 crime. And the homicides were 22 homicides year to date versus 32 last year. That's a 31% increase, 10 fewer homicides. Our violent crime is down 13.5%. That's 305 fewer violent crimes. We're seeing negatives in each of our crime categories. And that's an acceleration. Last week, that number was a 13.1% reduction in violent crime. So our violent crime picture, again, absent this terrible multi-victim homicide and shooting, notwithstanding that, overall, across the city, we're seeing improvements. In regards to our Part 1 crime, we have a 12.5% reduction, and we're also seeing reductions in all of our property crime categories: burglary, motor vehicle thefts, burglary, theft in vehicles, and personal thefts. Next, moving to our personnel strength, there's been no change in our statistical numbers at 9,232 sworn personnel. That's 228 below our authorized strength. And our civilian personnel are 2,657. That's 48 fewer civilian personnel. And with that, I conclude my remarks. I'm happy to take any comments or questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Clanche, any questions for Chief Moore at this time?
Right now, I don't.
Thank you. Commissioner Bonner, any questions for Chief Moore at this time?
Yeah, just one, please. First a comment, Chief. I was pleased, one, to see that there was no significant use of force over the weekend in response to the protests that you mentioned here in Los Angeles. Secondly, I was pleased to see the LEPPL put out a statement of repudiation along the lines of the comments that you just mentioned, and I think that's very important. But I also know that and assume that these kinds of things have a pretty significant impact on morale, even though they didn't happen here in Los Angeles, but they are things that affect the public's trust in the institution and the profession of policing. And so I can just imagine how those who are very frustrated with you know, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or whatever you might, how you may look at it. But I hope, one, that they understand that, you know, as we continue, because I think it does deserve a fair amount of conversation. We'll talk some today later, but also going forward. And I hope that there's an awareness that those conversations are in the spirit of opportunities to learn and prevent these kinds of excessive uses of force. And so my question to you is a similar question I've asked following some other high-profile events, and that is, what kinds of discussions are really underway in the department now to address, you know, the officer mindset, cultivate a healthy mindset and a healthy perspective in looking and processing this. And I can imagine they go from people just talking amongst themselves on patrol, a little bit of some roll call, but I just appreciate a brief comment again, really, on what efforts you know, the department of this size and scale makes in situations like this.
So thank you, and you're very much right. Not only to our personnel, but also their families and friends. We witness this type of just horrific violence at the hands of a police officer, and it reflects and has and have a broad brush effect on policing across the country, and certainly here in Los Angeles as well. And so, what we encourage our people to recognize is that we must own that. We must acknowledge that we, as representatives of law enforcement, that when some part of our profession in some other location or even locally tarnishes the badges and brings embarrassment or criticism, is that we must recognize and acknowledge that that is a failure, whether it be on an individual, and then also a consideration, is it a failure part of the larger system, and what may have contributed to it, and what actions of others could have interceded or stopped that from occurring. Secondly, is to encourage them to recognize that they have each day an opportunity to shine that badge through their actions, and that their actions do not represent the actions of what happened in Memphis or other abuses of discretion, that they build a little bit more of a restoration and a building and deepening of trust in law enforcement, that those acts are not represented. We see malpractice, we see criminal actions across all professions, and law enforcement is not alone in that. And yet we also understand, when the public looks at us in a singular manner, that it can be discouraging, but we remind our officers of their resilience to, again, go out and actively work to demonstrate their professionalism. I did that in those conversations on Saturday as well as Sunday and moving forward, and I'll continue that both as an individual as chief, but also our commanding officers, staff officers, our supervisors, and each other are working and remind each other that the work that they do matters, that their commitment, their values is what will go out and prevail in the day by demonstrating to the public what we stand for, in stark contrast to what they see in these videos. Lastly, we have done 2 other things. Our behavioral science services, our psychologists are in the areas, are talking and debriefing with our officers. We're also ensuring that helplines or instances of people need help or assistance as they work through this ordeal, is that those resources are available, peer counseling as well as our psychologists. And lastly, that anyone, if this is a circumstance that is undermining them as far as their readiness to go into the environment, that they identify, that they step back, and that they not be put in a position in a weakened state emotionally or otherwise, that they're to ensure that they're ready to go out and serve the public, to do in a way that's professional, and that takes care of themselves as well as those that they're sworn to uphold, to serve and protect.
Appreciate that. I'd just say we'll have some opportunities to talk some more about it. One of the concerns is just realities being that this is a different challenge. If you had 50 officers or 100 officers, you might approach it one way in terms of how you could approach those conversations. But in a department of this size and scale, it gets even more complex. So appreciate the comments this morning, and we'll look forward to talking with you some more about how we encourage those conversations in the wake of these kinds of incidents. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bonner. Commissioner Sobro.
No, sir.
Can
Thank you.
I, Commission President, I actually do have a question if I may.
Yes, Commissioner Clanche.
So what, Chief, one of the things that I think that was, I don't want to say commendable, but seen as the right action is the swift firing of police personnel. And I know that for the policies in place in LA would make it very difficult for you to take such swift action. But I'm wondering if I guess I try to understand like the Memphis policies, like how were they able to fire? Because I don't expect any LAPD officer to act in that way. We have policies in place to ensure that, but in such an action, I don't think that you would be able to you don't have the ability to fire in such a swift action, just like the Memphis department. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Well, we are under two different systems. The Memphis, again, employment relationship affords the chief there the ability to fire an individual based on the relatively quick investigation. In the department and for us with our charter, I have the ability to suspend an officer's peace officer powers to assign that individual home, relieve them essentially of their authorities as a police officer pending the investigation. The actual removal of that officer based on an investigation that then is reviewed by me would go through the Board of Rights process. And then that tribunal could find the person guilty and could remove them. The other avenue here also, though, is the criminal justice system, such as the district attorney's office, which acted immediately and forcefully in filing of murder charges, second-degree murder charges against these 5 individuals, is also available here and does happen here. There have been instances in which officers of this agency or others over time have committed criminal acts, and filings against those and prosecutions of them have moved forward. And so there are some parallels to what happened in Memphis, but there's also a different disciplinary system. Yes, you're correct.
I just think it's a safeguard for us to have that ability. And I know that right now there's like limits to our ability to fire officers in such an occasion. So something to think about, even for our like mayor or policymakers.
Yes.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Commissioner Clanche. At this time, we're going to open it up to public comment. Madam Secretary.
Our first speaker is caller ending 1264. Caller ending 1264, you're on.
Hello.
Hi, what
Can you hear
items
me?
would you like? Yes, what items would you like to speak on?
Public comment and the chief's comments.
Okay, 2 minutes.
Yeah, Chief. I'm glad that we have checks and balances, and that's what we should have. We shouldn't rush to any individual incident without having the checks and balances in place. I mean, one of our officers was removed, as you know, in Tahunga, and that was a very, very big shock to our community. And obviously that's being investigated and that's going forward. But we're having a problem with these protests because, they could go through the normal process of getting a permit, and that's what they do so that we can make sure that everybody's safe and everybody's secure and nobody gets out of line in this situation. But you can't have these things popping up all over the place without any kind of control. It's insane. I mean, people just blocking the street and nobody can access them. That is ridiculous. So we need all these things in place so that we can protect our safety. Obviously, we're still having a problem over here in the Foothill Division. I've tried to contact the captain about it and to speak to him to get some kind of communication going, but I haven't received a call back yet. And it is a problem, and it's been a problem for a long time. And totally with Foothill, totally getting nothing but crickets, silence, and I don't know what to say. I mean, we pay for this service through our property taxes, and like businesses in the area pay property taxes for their protection of their businesses, and you have all this illegal activity going on. It's unfair, and we'd like it to stop. And that's the end of my comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Betty Lay.
Morning.
Good morning. What items would you like to speak on?
Chief's report, agenda items, public comment, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Okay, first off, I really appreciated Chief Moore's report, and he's correct with all the stuff that's going on across our country. The sad thing is the amount of people that are blaming LAPD for stuff that goes on across the country that just isn't fair. I do support the donations on the agenda item. And I'd also be interested to find out how many of these negative speakers were brought up to show respect and to think it's okay to deface city property. That's just uncalled for. Apparently, some of these people need to go back to school and get some values and take action for their responsibility of doing criminal acts. I'm really hoping that and praying that our commissioners, the mayor and city council will select Chief Moore for a second term. He's a fabulous leader, and it's something that we need for the city of Los Angeles. And with that, everybody stay safe and healthy, and I yield the rest of my time.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Jamie.
Hey, I'll speak on all items.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Okay. Yesterday, Chief Shithead Moore took it upon himself to express on Twitter his smarmy, whiny sentiments about an LAPD arrest report released on Sunday. The report detailed a protester who was arrested on Saturday for breaking one window and for updating, presumably improving the appearance of one wall of a business with paint. The window was broken with an unspecified, quote, tool, and allegedly more, quote, tools commonly used for breaking windows were found in his backpack and booked as evidence, along with more paint, that famously very dangerous substance. I have to say, I find myself to be pretty curious about what exactly a tool commonly used for breaking windows is. And I'm wondering almost sincerely if you feel like disclosing that information, information which strikes me as being pretty fucking important since it was the evidence used to set this person's bail for felony vandalism at $20,000. I don't mean to brag, but I've been working out and I personally feel pretty confident that I could break a window without using any tool at all. I could probably break it with my hand. You know what I can't do with my hand? I can't embed fucking bullets in the bodies of human beings. Vandalism is not violence, and the word disproportionate is not an extreme enough term to describe this reactionary repression of our right to protest against the police's wanton ability to fucking kill us. Fuck you, Chief Moore, for modeling this kind of repression that's being used all over the world, most specifically right now at Cop City in Atlanta, where they just killed someone. Thanks. I'll yield the rest of my time.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Kim Holmes.
Can you hear me?
Hi, yes, what items would you like to speak on?
All of them.
Okay, 3 minutes.
First of all, I just have to say that I am just disgusted and I can't believe the hypocrisy what's going on in this committee, starting with the chief. First of all, the chief needs to be fired. That's first. Second of all, this entire response to Tyree Nichols, when we have Keenan Anderson, who was just killed, in addition to Takar Smith, I can't remember the other gentleman's name, and the same amount of force is used. Bullets kill people, tasers kill people. This whole thing as if, oh my gosh, they beat up this man. I can't believe it. This is so horrific. He's dead. As if we don't have thousands of people of color that have been killed here in Los Angeles. Where's the responsibility? Where's the reaction for that? This whole committee is like, oh my gosh, your response is so great to a killing across the country. What about the killings that happen here in Los Angeles? And yes, other professions have issues, but they aren't responsible for people's lives. Most of us, I go to a job and I embezzle money. I'm going to lose the job and I'm probably going to be arraigned and go to jail. But these cops, under no circumstance should they allow it to continue to kill people. And the problem is there's no accountability here in Los Angeles. Forget about what goes on in the other country. Nobody is blaming LAPD for what happened to Tyree Nichols. We're blaming the cops for what happened to right here in LA, Keenan Anderson, and all the other people, Takar Smith, all the other myriads of Black and brown people that have been killed here in LA. Where's the response to that? That's what I want to know. This entire commission is complicit in allowing this to continue here in Los Angeles. Oh, it's just 3 people that were killed so far this year. Oh, no big deal. It is a big deal. These families deserve to live their lives and to have peaceful enjoyment in our community. But we aren't allowed that because this commission rubber stamps everything that this man does every single time. And I want to know, where's the accountability here? Where is it? Please let me know. That's what you all should be talking about, not how great you are in responding to something that happened not in LA, as if none of these things have happened here. It happens here all of the time. And it continues to happen because there's zero accountability. So this commission is completely complicit. So pat yourselves on the back for that, because you have done nothing but allow this to continue year after year after year. And we don't feel safe, none of us. So that's so nice. You're worried about the officers and how they feel about what happened in Memphis. Well, what about what happens here? What about the changes that need to happen here? And we've seen none of it as a community, none of it. And none of us feel safe here in Los Angeles, none of us.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have TJ.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes, what items would you like to speak on?
All items.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Yeah, basically mirroring the same sentiment that was just beautifully spoken. I'm speaking on all items. Chief Michael Moore must not be reappointed. How much more deaths do we need to see in the city of Los Angeles? And how many more deaths from the hands of the police? It feels like every fucking day another Black person is being killed, mistreated, harassed as an unhoused person in the city. And in the name of Keenan Anderson, Takar Smith, Oscar Leon Sanchez, and so many others that were stolen, Chief Moore, you bring up Tyree Nichols and you should be fucking embarrassed. You pretend that you're moved or sad about this. And as you say, this is not how policing should be in the 20th century. But how are the Memphis police officers any different from the LAPD? Commissioner Kalance, you even brought this up, but look at how your officers are are approaching these situations. They show up and they shoot and kill upon arrival. What the hell are we missing here? How many additional units were sent in to kill Takar Smith? How many cops does it take to respond to a situation like that? Chief Moore claimed that Takar Smith tried to protect himself with a chair, a fucking chair, a household item, and yet your officers are so poorly trained and so incredibly violent and racist that they tased, pepper sprayed, and shot him to death. 6 officers. Do you really not think in the 20th century that there could have been a way to have approached him differently, an approach that doesn't involve tasers, pepper spray, and guns? What is wrong with the police chief who can't see that the LAPD's approach to quote unquote solving crime means murdering Black folks upon arrival? 6 cops couldn't manage to calm Takar Smith down because they shouldn't have been there. It's not fucking working. It has never worked. Black, brown, and indigenous folks are terrified for their lives when interacting with armed officers because they shoot before attempting any other type of de-escalation. Although de-escalation will never work because these officers are trained and conditioned to believe that their lives, blue lives, LAPD lives are more important than the people they serve. So when serving community members, they shoot them because they themselves are terrified and untrained. Chief Moore, you gotta go. I don't know what else to say, but your time is up. You've had enough time. We have seen your role, your toxic, murderous, racist role as police chief, and it's been dark, and it's a dark time for Los Angeles. So no more, Chief Moore, you gotta go. No reappointment for Chief Moore. And just, you know, the way you handled Echo Park, fencing off a public place for families that needed access to the park, it's violent, it's cruel, and you got to be ashamed of yourself.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have MJ King.
Good morning. All items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Month after month, this commission has heard from both defenders and critics of the LAPD. Everyone agrees that Chief Moore must go. Chief Moore released a statement that the officers who murdered Tyree Nichols used unjustified and excessive force when his own officers killed Houston Tipping during a training exercise in the same way, a training exercise. If this is how LAPD treats their own, how do you think they treat our community members? Do we only review body-worn video when there's a loss of life? Who's reviewing the footage of the interactions that don't result in death? The daily excessive force and civil rights violations of our community members. But we all know LAPD kills regardless of cameras, regardless of training, regardless of policy, and this board rubber stamps these murders. Chief Moore, you sent a letter to the Nichols family. What about every Angelino your department has killed? Clear and violent abuse of authority, inexcusable, introspection. Those words are hollow when you refuse to address the harm your department inflicts on our communities. Too many lives have been stolen by LAPD, and each one was preventable. Speaking of introspection, now would be a great time for this board to think about your contribution to police violence. You know that Chief Moore failed to act on behalf of an LAPD captain who was being sexually harassed, that he lies about racialized stops and reports on crime through a lens of race. He robbed the city of half of the nearly $640 million American Rescue Plan funds for officer salaries during the pandemic. He literally told you that culture eats policy for lunch when asked about officer accountability in his department. He spelled it out for you. Officers are not and will not be held accountable for participating in the January 6th assault in the Capitol or circulating Valentine's mocking the violent death of George Floyd because the thin blue line brotherhood is more important to him than public safety. Stop rubber stamping LAPD violence. Reject Chief Moore's reappointment. You've taken public comment month after month from both critics and defenders of the LAPD. Everyone agrees that Chief Moore must go. Reject his reappointment.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have caller ending 3146.
Hopefully that
Hi, what items would you like to speak on?
for 3 minutes, please.
Okay, go ahead.
The Chief Winter meeting. I mean, you've gone to so many meetings, and you could talk to the chief in Memphis pretty easily. So, one of the things that I've wanted to talk about today is the anger baiting that happens with the police department. So many times I have not had any anger, and then there's many times where I dealt with an officer, and I was like, man, that's a bunch of BS. And so it was the building blue bridges today. And there's a caller who calls about Officer Smith and the Monica Rodriguez, and that's destroyed a blue bridge. Eric Rivera destroyed a blue bridge. Grisario Mack, that's a destroyed blue bridge. The taser issue this year so far, that's destroyed a blue bridge. And though it's on you, however, there's $31 trillion of debt, and that's on the president and the Congress, right? So this is screwing up completely what the LAPD can try to do. It's very, very, on behalf of the LAPD, we're really lucky I can't round up every president, prosecute them, put them in jail, and chop their heads off. We're lucky I can't do that, because I would on behalf of every police officer, because there's this another thing that's going on. So I called to protect the person that's the officer. No officer should be giving training that leads to them being in a criminal charge. That's what's happening. So you got this taser with these vague law. If somebody needs to be prosecuted for that vague law, though. You see, I'm for prosecuting when it ends up out of policy. Suspect ends up dead. That's a murder. I'm for that, but I'm for supporting you, right? I've seen what they train on, and they do this almost perfectly. So if the LAPD was allowed to do something and the training was changed, maybe we'd have different outcomes, right? And there's some callers that call up and say that the training, even if you trained it, that's not going to be good. Okay, that's how you feel. Cool. I don't want to take that away from you. I've seen in Commissioners Johnson, Saltzman, Madison, Kim, Hill, nobody's changed anything. And this whole thing is that you don't have any head-to-toe body armor. This changes every problem you got. It is rooted in unprotected officers who have to shoot first. There's a bike part, or it was a veteran with a vape pen, or it was a fake gun. This line needs to be looked at heavily. And the chief and all the chiefs and the presidents and this state sanctuary law crap that goes on too, it's just completely not helping anything. And so I keep calling up.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have T.
Hello,
Good morning. What items would you like to speak on?
all of them.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Power and strength to Keenan Anderson's family, to Carr Smith's family, Oscar Sanchez, and all others murdered by LAPD. I was rudely cut off last week while I was trying to read a description of a report that's the use of force report on the LAPD website on the Taser 7. During the course of 2021 and 2022, the department will transition to the XN Taser 7. The Taser 7 is a 2-shot ECD device that was designed to improve the performance of previous Taser models by reducing the number of misses, clothing disconnects, and close probe spreads. These issues were the most common reasons the tasers were ineffective in obtaining the desired neuromuscular incapacitation. The Taser 7 features the great body with the option to deploy 2 different range cartridges that contain both wires and probes. The objective of this so-called less than lethal device is to allow officers to maintain a safe distance up to a maximum of 22 feet, depending on the cartridge selected. This potentially providing the officers an opportunity to de-escalate dangerous situations. Now, after reading that and reviewing that, it clearly indicates that your officers were out of policy in the murder of Keenan Anderson. A safe distance and de-escalating a dangerous situation. The man was unarmed, asking for help and complying on his knees with his hands up when y'all murdered this man in the middle of the street and deployed the taser on his back, directly on his heart for several minutes. Is that in policy? Based on what I read, what is the name of the officers involved? We want the names. We demand that they're fired and held accountable as swiftly as swiftly as the brother in Memphis. Okay. And how dare y'all raise up his name? And it's disgusting that Chief Moore would talk about Tyree Nichols and sending this family a letter. Audacity to send. Do you think that family wants a letter from you? Y'all are hypocrites. What reality are you living in? No amount of money or training can stop or to even fix this evil. Keep go. Y'all are complete.
Thank you. Next, we have Evangeline.
All items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
What happened in Memphis is horrible and is a result of lowering the bar to become a police officer nowadays. I heard these officers were prior criminals, so of course, that's unwise for police departments to hire violent recruits who have no regard for law and order. I watched the video and it's also alarming how out of breath these officers got after just running a little bit. Officers should have self-control and they should be physically fit. Is LAPD lowering the bar? I know you're short 800 officers. In the most recent class, you said you only had 28 instead of 60 new recruits. That's less than 50%, which equals an F on a report card. I know you don't require the multiple choice test for all new recruits according to your website. Some can get out of it. You want 30% female officers by 2030. That is another example of lowering the bar because you'll choose a female over a male, even if the male is more qualified. Drop the stupid COVID shot mandates and you'll get officers who actually have a conscience and follow their conscience. Good officers are retiring early. You can't pay them enough to get them back to come back. The ones that are left are just counting down their days. It's hard to get new good officers. No one wants to join. Why? Chief Moore and LAPD leadership don't have their backs. If they are truth tellers, they get punished if they don't play along to get along. What happened to whistleblower protections? Captains are afraid to stand up for what's right because of retaliation. What you did to Captain Johnny Smith was unethical and wrong. Chief Moore knows it, and so does Deputy Chief Hamilton. They are lying to cover up the truth. Some of you commissioners know it too. And of course, the community of Sunland, Tahunga, and Pacoima, we know it. LAPD is to protect and serve, but who? You'd rather protect and serve yourselves, the top brass, and Councilwoman Monica Rodriguez instead of we, the people. Bring back the thin blue line flag, and you can start to restore officer morale. Apologize to Slow Contreras for unjustly moving him to please Monica Rodriguez. Marketing won't work if you don't have their backs. Monica wants to spend money in marketing, but she's the one who actually authorized the defund LAPD. The irony that she's the head of public safety is disgusting. Oftentimes, there are only 2 to 3 officers during the night shift at the Valley Traffic Division. San Fernando Valley is a huge amount of area to cover. This is unacceptable. Chief Moore shouldn't be reappointed for another 5 years. He wants 2 more years, so he'll have his 7 years total to get his chief of police pension. That it's obviously about the money. Vass will probably choose someone just as bad as him, if not worse, but we should take our chances because more needs to go. If the officers out there are listening, just know we have your back. Thank you for protecting us each and every day. Don't give up. We need you. We need safety for our families, for our children. God bless each one of you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Ted Trubinsky.
Good morning, all items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Item 1, it's vile that Chief Moore started this meeting talking about Tyrese Nichols like this. His family doesn't want to hear from you, especially when we have the families of Takar Smith, Oscar Leon Sanchez, Keenan Anderson,
Valentina Peralta, Melly Corrado, and so many more here in LA. With regards to the Friday night protest, why were officers like Officer Eltekian and Officer Sausalito pointing less than lethal munitions at the heads and faces of protesters, media, and legal observers at point blank? Why wasn't there a single police officer on traffic control, especially as LAPD chaotically drew protesters into an open street? After 2020, has there been any attempt to de-escalate nonviolent protests with anything other than violent intimidation? For item 4, we want to see an end to Michael Moore leading the LAPD as chief. You've heard me and almost a unanimous public bring up that in the past 3 meetings, and we don't want his reappointment. Item 5, when you discuss this reappointment, please take the public's urging to not reappoint Chief Moore. Last week, Soberoff said, you only need to do a quick Google to find out that body cams lead to less out of policy action by officers. But after Googling, do body cams curb police violence? The first return was a 2022 article from the National Institute of Justice, which states, quote, a comprehensive review of 70 studies of body-worn cameras use found that larger bodies of research on body-worn cameras showed no consistent or no statistical effects, unquote. As we saw in the brutal killing of Tyrese Nichols, body cameras do not deter officers from the culture that they are trained to enact. As Chief Moore said last week, culture eats policy for breakfast and lunch. For item 3B, we rejected. We don't want 20K going towards cops around kids, especially under the guise of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We also don't want another 20K going to community outreach. For item 3C, we rejected. Looks like it's a donation of $8,000 for officers to run a race. Seems weird. For item 3D, another $5,000 for morale. No thanks. No more holiday parties for cops on the job. Again, no to the Building Blue Bridges event. We don't want cops near students. I yield the rest of my time.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Sheila B.
Yes, hello.
Hi, what items would you like to speak on?
I need my full 3 minutes.
Okay.
So let me start with this. Fuck you, Chief Moore. Leave now. Withdraw your bid for reappointment, you sniveling, racist, murderous, corrupt coward. I implore each of you as commissioners to refuse to reappoint him. In case you somehow still don't understand why, how dare Chief Moore mention Tyree Nichols? You don't get to say his name while you have blood on your hands, while all the cops under his purview and policing as a system as a whole have blood on their hands, and you represent all of it, and you've shot 3 people yourself. The irony and hypocrisy. You talk about officer discipline when you rarely, if ever, discipline cops, and you yourself shot 3 people and were not disciplined, which is why your bitch ass is here. You talked about how disturbing that video is and that it has no place in 21st century policing, while LAPD killed 3 people in the first week of January. Let's not pretend like LA doesn't have Tyree Nichols-like cases. You don't get to mention his name when Keenan Anderson was murdered under very similar circumstances, and you have yet to name or fire them. We as community demand that you immediately release the names of the cops who killed Keenan Anderson and Takar Smith. We demand that you immediately fire them, and while you form your lips to say that you can't because of policy, let me remind you that it is a policy that was made up, and it could and should be changed. And at the minimum, you can pull those murderous, violent, dangerous, and abusive people from the streets, and it should not be on the taxpayer's dime. They should not be on paid leave. You talked about how you're proud of the police for the response to protests. You mean police showing up in riot gear and escalating at every turn, all while there is still a class action lawsuit stemming from 2020's uprising, all under the misleadership of Chief Moore? Yeah, look down, you motherfucker. You know that you're a disappointment. You talked about the peacefulness of cops. You are so out of touch, it is disturbing, and you must go. One of you mentioned the cops' morale and how they feel. No one cares. Where is the concern for the morale of the families of Keenan Anderson, or their feelings, or the family of Takar Smith, or the 3 people that you shot, Chief Moore? How about the morale of the city of Los Angeles who wants you to go? How dare you mention Tyree Nichols' name or send them anything when you fly a thin blue line flag at your house, despite saying it's being seen as racist? You mentioned his name and you removed the thin blue line flag, and release the videos real quick as a pathetic PR stunt and a pathetic attempt to bolster your reputation while you make a bid for reappointment. We see through your bullshit and we reject it and you. Let's remember that the LAPPL, who you mentioned, protects you and fights against every modicum of change that you say that you want, like actively lobbying against SB2 in the recent legislative cycle. You make it crystal clear who your priority is, and we're making it crystal clear priority is.
Thank you. Next, we have Steve Rogers.
Good morning. All items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
There is no right to resist. When you look at the three incidents, the Sanchez, Smith, and Anderson incidents, what you'll see is that there is tremendous attempt to verbalize and de-escalate on the part of the officers. The responsibility for what happens lies with the person that resists. The police have the right to use force to effect an arrest, overcome resistance, and prevent escape. You will see those elements are present in all incidents. Rather than listen to the lying nonsense of people that are just anti-police, I encourage everyone, take a look at those videos, judge for yourself. Those officers made a tremendous attempt to de-escalate through verbalization, and maybe they should have taken more decisive action. In the one case, you don't let someone get into a kitchen where there's a knife. You've got to take immediate action. Everything is on camera. You can see it for yourself. So there is no right to resist. The responsibility for what happens to those individuals, and every death is tragic. Condolences to their families. But the responsibility is on that person, okay? You do not have a right to resist. I have to keep repeating that because it seems like some people think they have a right to use violence and to resist the police. You do not. Also, vandalism is violence. It's a form of violence against private property, which is communists that come on talk about. Vandalism is not a problem. It is a problem. Maybe you don't own a business. Maybe you're not concerned about it, but vandalism is a form of violence. There should have been arrests at police headquarters for anyone that committed vandalism against police headquarters and in Hollywood or any place else. And those people need to be charged and need to be held accountable by the system. The reason why Los Angeles is becoming less safe is because there are no consequences for crime. And when certain groups take over streets, that's basically false imprisonment. Okay, they have no right to do that. And I commend any law enforcement that takes strong action to effect arrests in those situations. As far as Chief Moore is concerned, Commissioner Briggs, I know that you have, you have something, an item in the future. I think it's item 4, and but you didn't say how much time we would have to speak. I noticed you omitted that one time before, so it'd be helpful if you would explain what exactly the process is when we get to that point. I highly recommend that people look at those videos. I know I'm repeating myself, but you need to see what's going on. Trained professionals are the LAPD. You cannot send civilians in who are unarmed in situations that are not stable and unsafe. They will get hurt. The officers have a right to defend themselves against great bodily harm and a right to go home. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Jessica Craven.
Hi, all. Thanks. My name is Jessica Craven. I'm a longtime Los Angeles resident. I'm going to be quick because I know a lot of people want to comment. I just want to say that it is really depressing to listen to this police commission meeting and know that the obvious move here in light of everything that's happened, in light of the 3 Angelenos who were murdered unjustifiably in the first 6 days of January, in light of what's happened with Tyree Nichols, in light of all of it, Chief Moore cannot be reappointed. We must start new with someone new. I don't even know who can do the job, but it absolutely can't be him. And honestly, I feel like all of you on the commission need to step down as well. This entire system is so broken and so rotten. And I very much doubt that you're going to listen to what any of us are saying because you don't seem to really care what the public wants at all. But if you do vote to reappoint him, you will have lost the tiny, tiny thread of credibility you have left. So please don't reappoint. Please recognize that we have a disease and a sickness and a completely broken policing system and try to do something about it. Show you care in some way, Because right now, what you're saying and doing shows you don't care, and what Chief Moore is saying and doing shows he doesn't care at all. And it's really an insult to the many, many victims who have died at the police's hands. I yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Philip Tabby.
Yes, all items.
Okay, 3 minutes.
I guess today is the last day to use our voices to help leverage your decision, commissioners, on recommending or not recommending Mike Moore for a second term. And that's, of course, if you already haven't reached your decision. We all are hoping for an honest conversation today. Even though under Mike's command, LAPD has lost credibility and respect from the communities for not being honest and respectful. Having deputy chiefs come to community meetings to lie to community members is not cool. Are you going to give a 10-day suspension and demote a Captain 3 to a 1 for cursing outside of his car window while driving in uniform while attending a CPAB recorded meeting? You know, for the record, I'm not recommending that punishment for anyone that does or does not do something minor. But the hypocrisy needs to stop. The gaslighting needs to stop. Under Mike Moore's command, morale has dropped and the crime has risen to scary levels. This is costing people their lives. While Mike fills up on Dodgers beer, makes bad decisions, and milks Los Angeles for every penny that he can. In your chief's report, did you say you have great respect for the Memphis police chief? You know, there's an article here that I'm reading from the New York Post, and it's titled Memphis Police Chief Carolyn Davis Fired from Previous Atlanta Job After Botched Sex Crimes Probe. Interesting. On to COVID, 221 total infections, 185 were vaxxed, which is 84%, 36 are unvaxxed, which is 16%. And let me remind everybody, only the unvaxxed are testing. Imagine if they tested the vaccinated. Scary. Stop the illegal mandates. And I really want to congratulate Chief Moore. Really, you're the only one in the city who has united the pro and law enforcement residents of Los Angeles and those residents who don't like law enforcement. We all agree that Chief Moore needs to go. If you want more officers hired and more volunteers, get rid of who's holding you back. We have a chief who clearly does not care about this community. I yield the rest of my time so somebody else can say no, Chief Moore.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Richie.
Yes, hello. All available items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Yes, so Richie Serjanko from the People City Council. I just want to reiterate what Sheila said. Fuck you, Chief Moore. I want to hold space for the families and say the names of Takar Smith, Keenan Anderson, Oscar Leon Sanchez. And I think it's wildly inappropriate for Chief Moore to send a message to the family of Tyree Nichols. Do you think that that family wants to hear from your pig ass, Mike? No. Their son was just killed by the police. Why would a fucking police chief from LA bring anything to that family other than more trauma? And it's ridiculous that you would do that while right here in Los Angeles, LAPD killed 3 people this year. It just doesn't make sense to me. It's just this fake show. Who are you trying to prove something to, Mike? No one is buying this. And it's just you're reinforcing trauma on people for no fucking reason just to make yourself feel good. I really don't feel like speaking much anymore after this. Mike Moore is a complete asshole, and this commission should not reappoint him. Yeah, that's it. Fuck you, Chief Moore.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Mark Dutton.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes, what items would you like to speak on?
All of them.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Okay. Oh boy. Yeah, I mean, there seems to be a pretty solid consensus here on the chief's future. So please take that into consideration, Commission, when you're ruling on this. I want to just run through some points, probably out of order, but I just want to get this all in as quickly as I can. There's no good way or bad way of telling the truth. It's just the truth. It's not fluid. It's not your truth. It's not my truth. Officers that do that in the LAPD are demoted, removed, moved, and punished. Officers that don't and toe the political line are promoted. Does that sit well with anyone, pro or anti-police? That just doesn't make sense. We need to fix this. We need to fix the LAPD. I know you guys are understaffed. I know it's tough. And we cannot judge every violent encounter with the between the police and the public as being some kind of racist or violent action on the police's part. You cannot expect to send an officer into a potentially violent situation without the proper tools to protect themselves or put down that situation. Unfortunately, some people will die. And when you look at it on YouTube and TikTok and everything else, it always looks like a cop murdering somebody. That's not the case. Study this stuff, people. Come on. Let's all try to meet in the middle on this. You cannot assume all cops are bad or racist. You will lose. You will first lose all the good ones if that's what we're doing. So I understand the chief, again, I said this last time, it's a really tough job, especially in LA. I get it. And he has to walk this line between politics and what the community needs and what the officers need. I get it. But politics are last on that list. You cannot be a politician. You have to understand the politics, which are totally corrupt in our district and I'm sure other districts. But you have to be able to walk that line. And we always talk about these statistics going down at the beginning of these meetings. Why is that such a joke to all the community? We just had 3 catalytic converters stolen a week ago within houses of each other on 12323 in Tahunga, 3 of them in one morning within like a period of 30 or 40 minutes. This is organized. We're not interested in your statistics. We're interested in putting more good cops on the streets. Thank you.
Madam Secretary, this next caller will be the last for public comment.
Okay, Michael Williams.
Can everyone hear me?
Hi, yes, what items would you like to speak on?
All of them.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Whew. It's always really hard to call into the police commission for me because, especially after stuff that happens, like what happened to Tyree Nichols, because I've literally been in the room with a lot of you commissioners where murders and people who were killed by the LAPD have gone approved and said that it was okay. And to hear you all sit here after George Floyd, after now Tyree Nichols, after all these different people who have been killed and try to justify yourself and try to make yourself look like you understand or that you care is really tough. It actually hurts. Like it actually physically hurts me to even listen to you all talk. And I know you guys hear a bunch of people saying, fuck you, and you guys are horrible people, and you guys, which is all true. But I really want you to hear what I'm saying. You all are part of the problem. You all do not get to look at someone else's issues from another state, from another city, and sit there and say how horrible it is when you have things that are going on in your city that you have the ability to stop. You have the ability to make changes to those things, and you do not do that. You do not use the power that you have been given to make things different. You see, me and the other people who are calling in to say that how tragic it is, the LAPD is murdering people at an alarming rate. We're using what power we have to make a difference. You all actually have legislative and policymaking abilities. You have the ability to fire Chief Moore, but you do not do that. You do not take that power and use it to make a difference. And then you sit here and spit in the public space by telling us that we need to listen to y'all about how horrible what happened to Tyree Nichols is and how much it's hurting the police department and they're suffering. I don't know what is wrong with you people. I literally don't. You all need to do some real soul searching if you really actually care about what happened to Tyree Nichols. And really think about what you are doing in your position. I don't understand it. Chief Moore, you suck. This commission sucks. It is painful and tiring to have to day after day, week after week, listen to you all. And then you wonder why people are breaking your windows down because you don't listen when we call.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. At this time, we're going to go to item 3 on the agenda, the consent agenda item. Are there any commissioners that want any of the items held for questioning?
No.
Seeing none, I move that we adopt items 3A, B, C, D, E, and F. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. At this time, we're going to go to item 4 on the agenda. We will have 1 hour for public comment on the application of Chief Moore for reappointment to a second term. And each speaker will be given a maximum of 2 minutes.
Okay, our first caller is O.
Hello, yes, I'd like the full time. Okay, so you've given us a few calls to citizens to trust police, but I'm going to address the untrustworthy material you've given us to explain why we can't, and to give you some suggestions to create a more trustworthy community. To compare your comments of the video of Tyree Nichols, which were brutal, grotesque, abuse of authority, unimaginable, but citizens of LA don't have to imagine because we see it. So it's weird that you can't. You don't use those words when you describe the extrajudicial executions of human beings at the hands of your officers, because we're supposed to believe that those actions in the video was what? Because we reject your implication that it was justified. We have no choice but to fill in the blanks, but we won't. You make so many excuses and justifications for the lives of those killed by your officers. For some reason, those lives are different. These human beings also had children, families, but we don't even know the names of the officers. You mentioned the triple homicide this weekend. That is tragic, and condolences to their family. You said you hoped to ID the killers or the killer. The killers of the individuals murdered by your police force have not been identified. So that cognitive dissonance does not make sense. Again, an instance that certain families deserve to have that sense of awareness surrounding the circumstances of their loved ones' deaths. But families you've affected can't even get the story without your guiding, manipulative, slanderous commentary and red arrows and circles. You also mentioned about the murder of Tyree Nichols that there were 5 individuals. There were actually 6. And the fact that you don't know that says you haven't actually paid attention to the news, and that they only released the names of the Black officers. So you seem to want to run with the narrative that the white officer who tased Tyree was not at fault, just the Black ones. Your condolences are selfish, conceited, because you don't run your department much different. So I'd like to reiterate that I'm employing the department to identify, charge, and fire the officers who killed Keenan Anderson, Takar Smith, and Oscar Leon Sanchez, and the removal of Chief Moore.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Beta.
Hello.
Hi, you're on for 2 minutes.
Hi, this is Bida. I organize with Mar Vista Voice. First off, I just want to say this commission is a complete joke, a rubber stamping charade. It's clear you're all completely deferential, even afraid of Chief Moore. Comanche, you could barely get the words out when asking Chief Moore if maybe, possibly, pretty please, could we please consider changing our policy at LAPD so we can fire police officers who commit brutal murders like the Memphis police did with Tyree Nichols? You all should be ashamed of yourselves. Next, I want to talk about the murders of Keenan Anderson, Takar Smith, and Oscar Sanchez. Keenan, Takar, and Oscar were murdered by LAPD in less than 24 hours over the first 3 days of 2023. These were instances of cops murdering people, unlike what a previous caller said. And yes, all cops are bad, because why? Because cops are the agents of a violent and racist system. Chief Moore, you should have lost your job immediately following those murders. It's outrageous that you're allowed to keep your job. It's outrageous that you get to sit there trying to take credit for a sanctimonious letter you wrote to Tyree Nichols' family. Tyree's murder is no different than your department's murder of Keenan, Takar, and Oscar. We demand that you immediately fire the cops who killed Keenan, Takar, and Oscar. We demand that you immediately disclose the names of the LAPD murderers. And we demand that this commission vote against reappointment of Chief Moore. Just a complete failure. I see the rest of my time.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Camille Lewis. Camille, you're on. Okay, we'll move on. Next, we have Elisa Avalos.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Good morning. Yes, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I would like to start off by thanking everyone for giving me the opportunity to give my point. I want to start off by saying, I'm sorry, Chief, but I don't think you should be reappointed. The reason why is because you listen more to the councilwoman. Right now, a commissioner asked you, what are the policies of firing an officer? And you said that you don't really have that many. You explained what you had, but why is it that you were able to remove Captain Smith and Officer Caesar? That wasn't right. You didn't ask the community. We were happy with them. Now, I called you, I let you guys know that last 2 weeks ago, there was a gentleman in front of my house for 3 days. I called 911. I called every officer. No one called. What happened? I took my son to the hospital. Friday night, I get home. That same gentleman was shooting at people from the roof of his apartment building, had his family hostage. No one once said nothing. But if you guys would have listened, none of this would have happened. Now, you had a community meeting in the Angel Gardens, but there wasn't that many community there. There was more officers. You let Monica take control of this meeting when it was your meeting. You're supposed to listen to us. Now, after that, no one's called me to volunteer or anything with you guys. But Sunlin Tahunga called me and asked me to volunteer with you guys on Saturday. You guys have volunteers. And I'm thankful that you went to the Sunlin Tahunga meeting. But what about Pacoima Neighborhood Council, Chief? You've had the opportunity to get all of us together, to come together, and you don't. You listen to the councilwoman. Now, I'm also disappointed in the commissioner board because none of you guys ever go to public events. You guys need to have more public events. Reach out to the...
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Dr. Molly Talcott.
Good morning. I am here to speak on the need for Chief Moore to lose his job, to not be reappointed. I was struck by his narrative that he hasn't seen police violence as occurred in Memphis in 4 decades. In 1991, I was a 15-year-old white kid in high school living across the country, and the violent and brutal beating of Rodney King in 1991 was my personal introduction to the inherently racist and violent nature of policing. And in the names of Keenan Anderson, Takar Smith, and Oscar Leon Sanchez, this is not a game. I also find it deeply exploitative to contact Tyree's family It shows that this is a political game for you and not about the inherent value of human life, Black and brown and poor human life. And we just can't continue to have an LA Police Commission and a chief of police that presides over apartheid and cares more about property and order in an era of excruciating and heightened inequality. And I'll say one more name, and that is Samuel Faulkner, who was killed by LAPD in 1927. So these conversations are not new. If you don't know who Samuel Faulkner is, look him up. Maybe read City of Inmates by Dr. Kelly Lytle Hernandez. Get yourself educated. But we're here to say Chief Moore must go. I stand with the families of Keenan Anderson, Takar Smith, and Oscar Leon Sanchez, who are in deep and intense pain right now. And all of us at part of the Los Angeles community that care about Black and brown life are also in pain. Chief Moore needs to go. And the LA Police Commission, as Jessica said earlier, if you want to retain a tiny, minuscule shred of accountability or respect, which I'm deeply suspect of,
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Sherry Bell. Sherry Bell, you're on. Okay, we'll move on. Next, we have Amanda Lasher.
Hi there.
Hi, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. So I feel very strongly that Chief Moore needs to step down. He is responsible for so many deaths, and 3 in 23 alone. We're not even till the end of this month and we're mourning these lives. And, you're there for the community and to make sure that we are protected and served. And by keeping him in this job after he has shown such a flagrant disregard for human life and for the way he runs his department, it shows that you do not care about the Los Angeles citizens. It shows the way you show accountability is to clean up your act and hold him accountable, because the longer that these people go, without being held accountable, the more this is going to happen. And you guys just seem like you are rubber stamping everything that he does. And it makes us feel that it shows us over and over again that you don't take this seriously, that you just pay lip service. And the more that you sign off on this, the worse it's going to get, the more that officers are going to feel that they can get away with this, and that there's, no real attempt to make a change and to stop these crimes and against the citizens of Los Angeles. Chief Moore must go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Miss Mincy.
Want to speak on all items?
Okay, 2 minutes.
Number one, I'm going to start off with the rejection of Chief Moore in this position. I've heard a lot of callers make a lot of statements. Stop criminalizing Black folks, because that's why these folks are dead. We have taken the time to demoralize families, but then we're uplifting somebody across the country. We have the death of Keenan Anderson and Mr. Smith and Oscar, that those families didn't get that benefit. They got demoralizing statements written about them in the newspaper, and also false reports on the reason why they're deaf. We saw things, I saw it from a different perspective. Each one of them were criminalized, and they didn't deserve to die in the streets like dogs. I don't think that he needs to be reappointed to this position, because I think that the culture of the police department, I have proof. Over 40-something years ago, my brother was killed. And it's the same damn police department that exists now that we continue to criminalize people. Our people should not have to run from the police. They have their hands up in the air. If your people are not, we need people that are able to go and provide services to our people. We have a budget that basically criminalizes the people of this city, and we deserve better. We don't deserve to have half of our police fund devoted to a police service that is murdering its people. There is nobody that is above the damn law that stuff because you speak and provide some type of a command. There's somebody like a lapdog. They've got to listen to that damn command and then be shot or tased or choked damn to death because you don't believe that they should be doing what it is that you're saying. I do think that we need to find and get the release of what are the names of these officers that have committed these crimes. That hasn't come out, but we will release false reports out to the community to make the villainize these folks that have been murdered in the streets. We need.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Eugene.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, 2 minutes, all of it. Yeah, I'm just gonna say what I've been saying, just reiterate the fact that if you on this panel continue to do the same things over and over again, you're gonna continue to get the same damn results. You know, we know that policing does not work. We know that policing brutalizes, murders, and oppresses communities of color, as well as poor and working class ones. We know that the solution rests in addressing the root of the problem, which is not more cops. Cops are not demoralized because of some stupid Blue Lives Matter thing or prospective cops. They are demoralized because people now see what policing is and what the culture is. So it doesn't matter how much housing you provide. It doesn't matter how much resources you provide. The fact of the matter is people don't want to join this racist, murderous department because they see it for what it is. And so if you actually care about addressing the needs of the people, I would suggest the people on this board, with the modicum of, I don't know, credibility they have, start endorsing and promoting policies that actually work. Look at the Reimagine public safety policy. Start pushing for that. And again, no more. We don't need more. And we need to get rid of this entire body as well, because y'all do not care about the public and public safety. I yield the rest of my time.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Naomi.
Hi.
Hi, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I would also like to speak against the reinstating of Police Chief Moore. I was really impacted, I think, listening to the chief's report that and an allusion to the fact that the LAPD has taken 2 steps forward and 1 step back, or that the policing profession has taken 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I guess it feels like not 2 steps forward to be killing people with tasers instead of guns. And I really agree with someone earlier who said that you all and we all need to do some soul searching. I also would like to call for the removal of the officers who killed Keenan Anderson, the officers who killed Oscar Leon Sanchez, and the officers who killed Takar Smith. I yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes, thank you. Hi. I'm here today to discuss the reappointment of Police Chief Moore and the fact that this is atrocious. The fact that you guys are sitting around a table applauding yourselves that he is doing his job, that the LAPD are doing their job. But you just had Keenan Anderson murdered on the streets. So how is that doing your job exactly? How can we appoint somebody who writes a letter to a family? They don't want to hear you. They don't want to hear you. They don't want you to say his name. They don't want you to say their names. How dare you sit there and feel justified? No more. We cannot appoint him. as our chief of police. And this is disgusting. All of you sitting here acting as if this is okay, that we weren't as bad as Memphis. You guys constantly murder people in the streets, people of color, and this cannot go on. How ashamed you should feel. I yield the rest of my time.
Okay. Caller ending 2120, you're on. Okay, we'll come back to you. Next, we have Yasmin.
Hi, this is Yasmin Watkins. Chief Moore is a trash can of an excuse for a human being. You shoot us down in the streets and then blame us for our own murder. Chief Moore has to go. For years, the community has been calling for his swift and immediate removal. Thousands of us have said we don't want any more Moore. We need someone else. And the fact that he had the nerve to speak about Tyree as Keenan's blood is still cooling in the streets is hypocritical and an insult. This whole commission is an insult to our existence. Release the names of the officers who killed Keenan. This commission perpetually approves and allows the brutal murder of its citizens. And you've made it clear that you don't care about us. And you have an opportunity right now to actually do something. The power to make change, the power to protect us. We don't need more in office, please, for the love of God, especially Briggs and Bonner, like, y'all are Black, y'all don't give a fuck. Like, change, please. And Chief Moore, the way that you're sitting there just like so calm, like, fuck you, man. Fuck you, I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Thistle.
Hello.
Hi, you have 2 minutes.
All right. I just want to say that every single officer on the police force is responsible for the countless police murders in Los Angeles because you're all complicit. More needs to go. And in fact, every single officer needs to go. The commissioners need to go because you cannot reform police. You need to dismantle the police force entirely and start over with a network centered on case by case, community care, mental health, rehabilitation. And I want to remind everyone listening and all of you that we live in a police state. The institution of policing as a whole is oppressive and murderous at every level, and it has been throughout history. And the police are only here to protect the 1%. They have absolutely no legitimacy, and they only have legitimacy because so many people are complicit. They abuse the system constantly, and they have reinforced for me that every level of law is illegitimate and that I should not take any of them seriously because it is all created under the same oppressive system. I want to say that I do not consent to my taxes going to LAPD. If we lived in a true democracy, I would be able to decide every time I filed my taxes what my money was going to. And I guarantee you that if that were the case, the police budget would be exponentially lower, as it should be. I know that no taxation without representation is a huge conservative talking point, but I want to reinforce that from a progressive direction because we pay your salaries non-consensually most of the time, as many of my young friends do. We never agreed to this, and you do not represent us. And lastly, I want to address the bootlickers in the beginning who are calling in saying we need to learn respect. I want you to remind yourselves that respect is earned. You don't owe anyone respect, not based on their age, not based on their status, and not based on the positions that they are illegitimately in.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Mayank.
Hello, can you all hear me?
Hi, yes, you have 2 minutes.
All right, thank you very much. So there's a number of things that have been said today. I probably don't need to repeat a lot of what's been said, but I'm here to urge you all to reject the reappointment of Chief Michael Moore for a number of the aforementioned reasons. But, I'd like to ask you to kind of think about what we live in. We live in a democracy, correct? And if you know the root of the word democracy, demos from the Greek meaning people, Chrissy meaning rule. So rule of the people. Every poll is a representative sample, but if we look at the voices that have been speaking on this police commission call today, the vast majority, I'm sure if we tallied it, it would be north of 85, 90%, have called for his removal. So in light of that polling and that sample of the Los Angeles population, if all of you choose to make the opposite decision, then what you're telling us is that you choose not to live in a democracy. You do not want the will of the people to happen. So I would seriously ask you guys to look at yourselves, the commissioners, to focus on what is being said, the substantive nature of the comments today. Yes, there have been expletives. Yes, there have been some rude comments. People are angry. Unfortunately, those things happen. But I would try to ask you to look beyond the surface nature of those remarks to the substance. And the substance is that there have been too many breaches of trust. There has been too much bad performance. And I know Chief Moore is dressed up in his, dress blues, perfectly knotted tie, has his flags behind him. He's a politician who's making his political bid for a new position today so he can get his extra 2 years, get his pension. We understand how the game works. However, putting on a pretty face on election day, so to speak, and saying nice things about victims in other cities doesn't mean you're doing your job well. All the other commenters have shown you're not doing your job well, so please, commissioners, listen to the will of people, protect democracy.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Charlie. Charlie?
Yes,
Hi, you have 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Has this commission gone to any of the CPAPs to talk to them about their opinion on the reelection of Chief Moore? Come to the Valley Bureau and talk to them, talk to the co-chairs. I could tell you that more than just one co-chair feels that Chief Moore needs to go. I think on this call today, only one person called in to support for his reelection. We need a better chief. We should not let this person get away with what he's done, the corruption in Salt Creek, the person you were celebrating with, during the South LA bomb incident. He gets promoted while you're punishing good officers, good captains. You're letting people get away with things. It's not right. I think that this commission should look deeper into the happenings of the ethics of this chief, because he doesn't have any morals. He cares about himself. He tries to play both sides of the fence. I was going to recite Humpty Dumpty because I think that pretty much explains him. He's going to fall, and it should not be on LA's time. Let him go to a red state, live it out, have a good time, Mike. Let LA get back to business, because we're not going to sit down quiet anymore. Both non-supporters and supporters of this department both agree. And I'll yield the rest of my time, and we live in a constitutional republic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Larry Stern. Larry, you're on. Okay, we'll move on. Next, we have Tim Horner.
Hello.
Hi, you have 2 minutes.
Thanks. My name is Tim Horner. I've attended many police commission meetings in the past, but this is my first time giving public comment. I'm doing so to ask you to deny Chief Moore's request for reappointment. I just want to say that what we all saw from the chief of police in Memphis is something that we have never seen Chief Moore do here. LA should be leading, not following, on what accountability and public safety looks like when it comes to law enforcement. Chief Moore has been the opposite of that during his 5-year term. Please just let it end. He said at the beginning of this that what he saw in the Tyree Nichols video was unimaginable. And that's just, it's disingenuous at best. Unless he just didn't watch the video of what his officers did to Keenan Anderson. Please let this term end and move on with a chief that will care about accountability and public safety. That's all. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Norma Chavez.
Thank you. I want to say no to the reappointment of Chief Moore because he does not back up the officers he represents. His decisions are easily manipulated by council members and very loud activists. I want Officer Contreras and Captain Smith back to the community where people work very well with them. I do strongly support the LAPD. There are bad apples in every field. Teachers make wrong decisions too, regardless of their level of education. The LAPD cannot be racist when a high percent of its members are Latino and Black. My community needs more police. We want more police force. We should not live in fear of who or when someone will break into our houses or steal our catalytic converters. Why do the hardworking people have to pay the price for some people making bad choices? The idea of dismantling the LAPD is nonsense. We can already see what happens when there is no law enforcement, and we could just think of the smash and grab. Last, I want to applaud all the callers who, regardless of where they stand in this issue, they show respect and manners. We can all make a point valid and clear without resourcing to being vulgar. Thank you so much. I yield the rest of my time.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Mark. Mark L., you're on. Okay, we'll move on. Next, we have Janae Lennox.
Yes, I am calling like the other callers to make sure that Chief Moore is not reappointed. The fact that you would start off saying that you had sent a letter to the family of Tyree is so mentally traumatizing that it lets us know where your mental state is at. Like the fact that you would think that that would be appropriate lets us know that you're just not the person for this position. I also would actually strongly say don't appoint anyone else in this system or in that position. Clearly, the system does not allow for people to have decency and humanity. That is the point of the system. I myself work with the most vulnerable people, particularly some extremely aggressive individuals, and I've never killed anyone. Why? Because my humanity is intact and I don't go into a situation thinking that I should kill first and think later. Too many times for too many families, that is absolutely the case. I will not understand the decision of this council to reappoint him, not only for his horrible record, but also that so many families, so many families have called in to say, please do not appoint this person because they have trauma. The fact that they have to call in to relive their trauma to tell you guys no more of this is really inhumane. It's inhumane for families have to take to the streets and stop traffic, to get attention, to tell you guys, we do not want this system. It's inhumane to have families do that. So for the families, for anyone else that is listening on this council, do not appoint Chief Moore. Do not put anyone in his position because the system is inhumane. The system is inhumane and we don't want anyone else in that position.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Candido.
Yes, good morning. For 2 minutes, please.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, I have two questions. This is directed to Chief Michael Moore. Good morning, Chief. My first question is, have the gangs within the department, have they been dissolved? And the second question is, what measures are being taken to prevent a sad tragedy like the one in Memphis? And those are my questions for Chief Moore.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Erica.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes, you have 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I've been sitting, I am calling along with the majority to urge you to not reappoint Chief Moore. I feel like you guys aren't really even listening and have probably already made your decision. But the majority of us calling, and it seems like two people who spoke even also against the reappointment of Chief Moore, but are pro-police, had their talking points. But Chief Moore he receives over $300,000 a year of our tax money. He got a $1.3 million retirement. He'll get another retirement. He is taking our money. He is killing our citizens, and he is gaslighting all of us. So everything I have, please do not reappoint Chief Moore. And if you do, all of you are complicit in the ongoing state-sanctioned violence, not against those in Memphis, but against those right here in Los Angeles. And it is your names, Decker, Tefik, Soboroff, which I'm sure you're proud of that, Kalanchi, Briggs, and even you, Bonner, who I know struggles with these things more than anybody else on this commission. So I urge you to have a conscience and listen to the people and not reappoint Chief Moore. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have caller ending 5547.
Good morning, members of the Los Angeles Police Commission, Executive Director T. Fang, Chief Moore, Mr. Inspector General, and our City Attorney. I consider it a privilege to voice my positive input to each of you in support of a second term for Chief Moore to lead the Los Angeles Police Department. In listening to the comments made this morning, I realize I'm in a very small minority, but being a long-term member of the community for 50 years, both residentially and professionally, and staying attuned to the state of the city, it appears to me that Chief Moore probably has the most challenging job in all facets of his responsibilities and continues his timeless efforts and management skills with 42 plus years of unblemished devotion to the Los Angeles Police Department. I don't believe there is another individual possessing the long-term seasoned skill sets and experience with all 21 divisions of the department, along with its specialized divisions, and having it to be the lead juggler in fiscally balancing the budget with limited financial resources. In the never-ending world of obstacles and criticism he encounters on a daily basis, it has always appeared that he is up to those challenges on a consistent basis and never shies away from the negativity being sent his way by the media and members of activist organizations. I do not envy the chief's position of having to police a diverse population encompassing 468 square miles with an understaffed department that continues to get smaller and smaller each year and is not given the resources needed to reverse that attrition that so many other law enforcement enforcement agencies are offering to new recruits. It is quite easy for the outsized critics to be the Monday morning quarterbacks, but I feel certain that if they walked a mile in the chief's shoes, they would realize how fortunate the city is to have this man as our chief, as I could never sum up all the positives that Chief Moore has accomplished in a 2-minute presentation. Thank you very much for hearing me.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Sangha.
Can you hear me?
Hi, yes, you have 2 minutes.
Okay, I need all my minutes. Thank you so much. I just want to say to people that's listening, because these people are not listening. These are colonizers. This system, just like you heard, is a parasitic system. They're doing their job to colonize us. You have to understand, these are colonizers. The main colonizer wants to keep its job, and the colonizers are going to allow it. Look at the age and the ethnicity of this council. No one speaks for the community. We have the bootlickers on here, then we have the colonizers, and then we have the people calling in. This is a logistic. This is just a formality. They want to keep you colonized. They can go to the state now and say, hey, we've had a meeting. We let the people speak, but they do not care. They do not care. They're not going to care. The only way that this must be destroyed is for the community to unite together for Black community control and land back. We do not need police in our community to keep killing us. But like everyone has already said, they rubber stamped it. For 400 years, they rubber stamped it because it benefits them. Look how they're lining their pockets with all the money that they have. Look at what they brought forth, letting you know how much they're going to take from you as taxpayers. No one sitting here is even paying attention. They're on their phones. They're rubbing their ears. They're not even considering nothing you're saying. So if you want to fight back, it's Black community control and land back. You don't need a colonizer to colonize you. You need the community to come together and unite and join African People's Socialist Party. Uhuru.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Robbie Davis. Oh, Robbie Davis does not have a current version of Zoom. Okay, we'll move on to Armando Lopez. Armando Lopez, you're on.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, yes, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm over here listening to all these people calling in with so much negativity, and it upsets me that the minute these people need help, their first phone call is going to be to the LAPD. I think Chief Moore is doing a great job. I think the commissioners are doing a fantastic job, and our police department is doing a great job. There's always going to be a few bad apples in there, but the way these people are calling in, it's like if you committed the crime, and it's very upsetting. And I think you guys are all doing a great job, and I'm for Chief Moore for another term. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Antifa. Antifa, you're on. Okay, we'll move on. Next, we have Keshav.
Yes, hello.
Hi, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. So it's interesting that both at the top of the Chiefs, the previous comment period and most recently, there have been what seems to be a couple of maybe paid actors or other members of the Foursquare Chief Moore's friends campaigning for him. Obviously, it's even one of them stated he's in the minority, and going, against the will of the people would be kind of problematic. I guess I'd like to use my time to bring up some incidents, from Chief Moore's tenure that we can use to reflect on whether or not reappointment is something that should be done. Let's remember the publicity stunt of detonating fireworks in South Los Angeles, the complete irresponsibility of how that was handled. And the fact that really there was no accountability taken by the chief or and holding any of his officers accountable for the people that were injured and who died from the shock and the stress of that incident. Let's also talk about the fact that Chief Moore has gone on right-wing media and comparing Black Lives Matter to right-wing extremist groups like the Proud Boys, saying that both are representing ideology counter to democracy. Is this really someone who we want representing the city of Los Angeles? Is this really somebody who we want representing our future and protecting our people? Like, yeah, maybe we don't need to defund the police. Maybe that's too extreme. But at the same time, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. So if you reappoint Chief Moore, then you will be engaging in that sort of insanity because you will be expecting different results from someone who has demonstrated that he has time and time again not held cops accountable and not put the lives of Angelenos first. He's protecting the blue, he's protecting his cronies in the department, and I sincerely urge the members of the commission to not allow him to continue his corruption and to actually put public safety and the lives of Angelenos first. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Q Jean-Marie.
Good morning.
Good morning, you have 2 minutes.
Jesus once said to his disciples, "The rulers of this world love to lord it over the people, but it should not be so with you." As we've seen in LA and around the country, law enforcement culture is brutal. With special crimes unit with names like Scorpions and Red Dogs, etc., how can they not be? All these units are created to put fear in certain communities. I don't need to say what communities these are, you guys know. Remember in 1999, police shot Amadou Diallo 41 times. Even Bruce Springsteen had to write a song called American Skin. I keep hearing about all these few bad apples. It doesn't matter if you put a Black officer in an organization, they will adapt to the culture just like employees adapt to the culture of the organization they work for. Keenan Anderson is dead because of the same police culture that murdered George Floyd and many others. The same police culture that mocked Tyreek Nichols while they were brutally beating him to death. It's the same police culture that allowed LAPD officers to pass around a Valentine's card with the picture of George Floyd that said, "You take my breath away," mocking his death. It's a culture rooted in hatred for Black folks and other people of color. The chief enabled that culture when he did nothing about it. He must go, no more. And on top of all of this, to add insult to injury, LAPD wants to use robot dogs to police our communities. Tell me, what could go wrong? What kind of fools you guys think we are? This police culture is rooted in white supremacy, militarism, plantation capitalism, and hatred towards Black folks and other marginalized groups. And this system is on borrowed time. Why? Because you can't police the people if you hate the people. It's like, and as it relates to blocking the streets, I would refer anyone to Exhibit A, Bloody Sunday, the Edmund Pettus Bridge.
Thank you. Next, we have Sherry. Sherry, you're on.
Good morning. Could you hear me?
Good morning. Yes, you have 2 minutes.
Okay. Well, I just want to say that, I agree with what everybody else has said so far, and I see this as a front office issue. Police officers are directed by day to day by the chief and what their immediate supervisors tell them to do. They may feel pressure to fulfill quotas, and the daily directives put them in a position to bring back work. Funding should not be tied or associated with citation stops. We need to limit the interaction with police and civilians during traffic violations. It's a conflict of interest. That city budget that funds LAPD receives funding from these citations. Is also a conflict of interest. The LAPD Foundation with these private donors influence the agenda that impact day-to-day folks. I think that what I've seen in these videos is a lack of patience and a lack of tact. And I see that the police officers talk to these grown adults like they're children and tase them when they're already subdued, which resulted in the death of Keenan Anderson. What I see is that racism will not be solved in my lifetime. Maybe changing out the chief will not change the racist culture in the LAPD, but it may be if we train all LAPD to approach everybody they stop like Bill Gates, like if they treat everybody like they were a white man when they stop them, we probably would see less police killings, because what we have is an unconscious bias and a conscious bias and a culture that is rooted in racism and discrimination. So I think that what we need to see is more transparency on what directives these officers are given on a day-to-day when they're on the beat, what are their priorities, and how the budget influences these priorities, because people shouldn't feel pressured to pull people over and bring back tickets. That's not what public safety is about, and we need police out of traffic stops, and we need them to stop using their unconscious bias to racially discriminate against Black and brown people with predatory policing, and they need to have more patience.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have caller ending 2120.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Ian Jameson, California Leftists for Freedom. Michael Moore has systematically violated the constitutional rights of the officers under his command by enforcing an illegal, unconstitutional vaccine mandate. 21 U.S.C. Section 360 BBB 3E1823 makes it illegal under federal law to mandate EUA medical product, which is what all the vaccines currently available are. And the First, Fourth, Fifth, Ninth, and 14th Amendments guarantee a constitutional right to medical privacy for all Americans, as articulated in the majority opinion of Roe v. Wade. He is a lapdog of the Police Commission and of the Los Angeles City Council. He has taken part in the shredding of the United States Constitution. He is a fascist. Fuck Michael Moore and fuck the Police Commission, which will almost certainly reappoint him. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Camille. Camille, you're on. Okay, we'll move on. Next, we have Hamid Khan. Hamid Khan, you're on.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes, you have 2 minutes.
Okay. Well, I mean, this charade that we are watching right now unfold is the same thing that we've always seen, where you almost every time you have a unanimous rejection of something, but you still go ahead and rubber stamp it. So it'll be interesting to see that what kind of rubber stamping happens on this matter. People have echoing several other callers, Pastor Q and others as well. What's not getting a whole lot of attention are the programs under Moore that have resulted in murder and extreme harm to our communities. I mean, Moore was there when the crash unit was fully on. Moore was there when the gang unit and the Rampart scandal was going on. Moore was there when broken windows policing and the Safer Cities Initiative was devastating people's lives in Skid Row. Moore was at the helm of this when Pret Bowl and Operation Laser was being unleashed, resulting in murders of people on the regular, from Jesse Romero in Boyle Heights to Grishario Mack at the Crenshaw Mall, to various other people, including back in 2016, or 16, I believe, of 6 murders in 6 months in laser zones, which included 4 young people under the age of 18. So, you know, these killing fields and these kill zones are very similar to what's going on in Memphis. So this is no different. Operation Scorpion, a street crime operation to restore peace in our neighborhoods. That's exactly what the Los Angeles Strategic Extraction and Restoration Program was. So it's not just like, you know, that whether Moore is an asshole or not, the whole institution is rotten to begin with, and many people agree with that. But it's just also the very targeted murder of people, the targeting and creating kill zones in the city is also Moore's specialty as well. So you know, we need to be talking about it and just reject them.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Javier Hermosillo.
Good morning. Well, you know, negativity rules when people are sitting at home idle and not working. And I think that what we're hearing is a product of that. I've been around the Los Angeles Police Department and as an outsider in various capacities, as a reporter, certainly as a member of the community. I did boards of rights, which are the police discipline cases for about almost 20 years. Um, and I've seen every side of police work. And no chief has ever been popular with somebody. And I think one of the reasons that we're having almost entirely negative people here is because most of the good people are working and don't have all this idle time. I've never heard of a police chief who was popular to everybody, okay, any more than a teacher. And I think that what people forget is that 50% of the LAPD right now is Latino. And so I'm Latino, born and raised. I live in same place, same part of the state I was born in, never moved. And, I'm not racist. I probably said or done stupid things, we all do. But the systematic attack by the liberal community against not just this chief, when Bernard Parks, African-American was chief, they called him all kinds of names, a sellout, whatever. And so I urge this commission, you've worked with this chief, you know what he's done, and as well as previous chiefs. And in terms of his communication to the people of Memphis, he's not the only chief that did that. Chiefs from across the nation did that because they feel the pain of the embarrassment that these officers have brought to the rest of the country. And so I urge you to continue to support Chief Moore because he's been one of the best chiefs that I've ever seen in 40 years.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Adam.
Hello?
Hi, you have 2 minutes.
Mike, do you remember Melly Corrado? She was just working at Trader Joe's till your maniacal murderers with something to prove shot into the store and into her too. Do you ever think about her father when you're lying through your fucking smile? Oh, Mike, you know exactly what you're doing. You've been doing it for a while. Mike, do you remember Jermaine Pettit? Your officers thought he had a weapon, they said. It reminds me of January 2020 when your pigs shot Vector Valencia dead. The official story was a car part. We're supposed to think an officer believed. And with the media and your pig boosters, it's something you think you can achieve. Mike, do you remember Valentino Rana Peralta, dead at just 14 years old? Casting the blame on another, on death your lies are crafted and sold. Cause who brought the rifle to the coat store? Whose department's the deadliest one? By design, all the reforms and trainings make way for more cops, bullets, and guns. Mike, do you remember Takar and Oscar? Your people stole them to start off the year. You killed them in Keenan, no rhyme, no reason. The cause couldn't be any more clear. But do you ever think about their mothers? Danny Hernandez, Alex Flores, and more. Oh, Mike, you're the worst kind of person. A thief, killer, liar, Chief Moore. Fuck you, dude. Eat shit. Eat shit. Trying to get the transcript to say it right. Eat shit. Yeah, right. There we go.
Madam Secretary, let's go to the next caller, please.
Eat shit.
Okay, next we have Matios.
Hello.
Hi, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. This is Matius with the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. We don't want Chief Moore to be reappointed, but in a lot of ways, Chief Moore is actually the perfect chief, and some of that was discussed just now. I mean, as the previous caller said, this is y'all are colonizers, right? This is a colonial effort, and we see policing in that history. But what Chief Moore does so well is leverage tragedy, like the killing of Tyree Nichols, in order to obfuscate the violence that the LAPD does, right? He's very good at being PR. In a lot of ways, people tend to forget the long list of just fuck up after fuck up that Michael Moore has done. And that's largely due to the Board of Police Commissioners here that, facilitates that forgetfulness too and plays the role of, I guess an unbiased examiner when it comes to Chief Moore's reappointment. But we need to remember that y'all are complicit in everything else the chief has gotten away with in the past and have even covered for him and facilitated donations and the expansion of the police force. And so in a lot of ways, this is just theatrics, right? This is really just a play because policing has always been violence, especially here in LA. It's always been racist violence. We only have to look at the last month to see, that racist violence play out. So in essence, this commission's a sham. We want the abolition of policing as a whole. Yeah, I suppose all I have to say is fuck Chief Moore, fuck this commission, and I yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Madam Secretary, that was the last caller. Thank you. At this time, we're going to go to item 5 on the agenda, the commission's discussion. At this time, each commissioner will be given 12 minutes to make comments and or question Chief Moore. This follows the commission's closed session discussions with Chief Moore and each individual commissioner's private discussions with the chief. At this time, I want to ask the chief a couple of questions of my own. Please start the clock, Madam Secretary. Chief Moore, I want to pick up on a question that Commissioner Kalanche asked you at the top of the meeting, and that is with respect to how promptly the chief of police in Memphis acted. You gave some of an answer. You talked about loosely some policies that we have in place that prevent you from acting as swiftly. Can you elaborate on precisely what those policies or state law and or agreements that are in place that prohibit you from acting as swiftly in terms of terminating an officer in a situation? And what I call to mind right now are the 3 incidents that happened here in January involving officer-involved shootings and or the tasing of Keenan Anderson.
So, Commissioner, thank you for the opportunity to respond. The city charter is the defining document regarding the discipline and removal of a police officer, a sworn member of the department. And within that charter affords the chief of police the authority to, upon the finding of guilt in regards to an allegation of misconduct, to suspend an officer up to 22 days, subject to that officer appealing that to an administrative tribunal known as a Board of Rights. A greater penalty, such as removal, which is what you're talking about, is upon completion of investigation, the protocols has my review and my recommendation to that Board of Rights tribunal for the officer's removal. At that point, the officer is suspended without pay after a 30-day allowance for continuation of that pay. And then upon completion of that Board of Rights tribunal by a majority vote of 3 panelists, so 2 of the 3, can find guilt or innocence on the charges. Secondly, upon finding of guilt, can and has the sole authority to assign the discipline up to and including removal. That decision then is brought before me, and in my review, my only option is to either agree with it or lower the penalty. I cannot increase the penalty. This is a process that takes time. It takes and oftentimes is delayed, as the criminal investigation by the local district attorney's office will frequently ask that the department not move administratively and allow the criminal investigation to proceed. The actions of what happened as my understanding with Chief Davis and the Memphis Police Department is that by her authority as the chief, she has the ability to investigate, evaluate, make a determination of guilt, and prescribe the penalty, which what she did, which was determination and immediacy of that. The officer, it's my understanding, has the ability to appeal that and follow that up. That is a system that exists in many other parts of American policing, but here in Los Angeles, and it's the charter authority is what is a governing document that provides for the discipline actions involving police officers. On the civilian side, it is much different. The ability of the chief to terminate an individual upon completion of investigation is a power that the chief of police has, subject to review and affirmation or otherwise by the Board of Civil Service Commissioners.
Thank you, Chief. I have one additional question for you. We've seen a number of officer-involved shootings over the years that involved individuals suffering from some form of mental illness. What steps would you recommend be taken by the department to reduce the number of officer-involved shootings of individuals who show signs of mental illness?
Well, this is an area that we've been focused on for quite some time, and we've strengthened our policies, our procedures, added tools to officers so they have the ability to de-escalate situations and have alternatives and not having to resort to the use of deadly force or any force for that matter. We've also looked to additional training for those officers on how to work effectively with persons experiencing mental illness, how to find strategies in which to safely resolve those while protecting the officer and others, as well as the individual having the mental health crisis. Lastly, we've continued to promote both our SMART teams, our system-wide mental health assessment response team, a co-responder model, which places a clinician with a licensed clinician with a police officer, and having this last year responding to calls involving mental health crises along with normal uniform patrol. But an area that we need to expand on multifold and has my advocacy as well as every police chief that I'm aware of is to get the psychiatric emergency teams, known as PET teams, to have licensed clinicians that work in pairs that actually go and are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at many more times resources than we have today to be available to handle calls that currently are being dispatched to law enforcement or fire because of the absence of those psych services. We have seen in the last year and a half, particularly the development of the Circle program. We have heard of added efforts by County Department of Mental Health to add additional psych resources, but both those PET teams as well as growing the number of in-house treatment facilities so that people can be properly given treatment and support so that they can transition out of this crisis and back into society in a peaceful way. Lastly, our commitment for continuing our efforts of de-escalation, of continuing our efforts of being successful with individuals experiencing mental illness includes this most recent edition of the Los Angeles Peace Foundation donated virtual reality system, which is going to allow us with a state-of-the-art system to train officers in pairs and in teams to deal with people experiencing mental health crises, and so they can work more effectively with teams, understand strategies that work, strategies that amplify or worsen a situation, and then go back and debrief that so that officers gain experience, scenario-based experience of what works and what doesn't work, so that when they come across a situation that has like characteristics, they have some muscle memory and they have some team strategies that they can call back on and deal with in these crises that are oftentimes sudden, dramatic, and filled with chaos. And officers are trying to do their best job. And in doing that, at times they have created missteps, they have made mistakes. This training is our effort to make those as zero as possible.
Thank you, Chief. I'll yield the rest of my time. Commissioner Decker.
Thank you, Commissioner Briggs. Chief Moore, this commission has discussed with you and here in public meetings at length in the past about creating a department that has greater gender equity. The commission passed the 30 by 30 initiative, reviewed recruitment, met with recruitment teams, tried to help focus and refocus recruitment on gender balance issues. We've discussed issues like childcare, deployment schedules, job sharing, different creative measures that may help address that problem. And you have also expressed support for all of this. But despite all those discussions that we've had in the past and all those efforts, we have not seen any significant change in the number of women in the department. And I bring this up not just because it's an important workplace issue and it's an important equity issue, but studies have repeatedly shown that greater gender equity in police departments decrease the use of force, decrease the number of grievances, decrease the number of community complaints, increase community engagement with their police department, increase community policing principles, and increase the number of crimes that women are willing to bring forward to their police department. So my question to you is, if selected for a second term, what is your specific plan for addressing this issue and bringing more gender equity into the police department?
So my commitment is, as with my appointment, which is to continue the strategies both in the internal atmosphere, the culture of our organization, to develop those women within organizations for greater representation at all ranks, while also recruiting more women into the workplace as recruits. And I'm proud of the work that we've done in my last 4.5, coming up on 5 years. Last year, 28% of our academy recruits were women. That's an all-time high. We've promoted more women during the last than any time during the last 10 years plus. In addition, the efforts of once they're in the organization, most recently, the most recent commander's test, as well as the most recent captain's test, women that were on those testing lists and that had become qualified were selected into new positions of higher authority as I build to deepen their representation. But strategically, we need to continue to work and deliver on the child care initiative that this commission, under your leadership and others, have begun in working in partnership with an organization from the San Diego Police Department Foundation and establishing child care so that primarily women, recognizing that in our role in society, it unfairly falls on the women oftentimes for child care, so that we can provide around the clock child care for women rather than them having to make a choice and perhaps pull back or leave this department during the childbearing years, find that they can in fact remain here, remain productive, and still see that their child is properly cared for during a shift work that oftentimes takes them outside the traditional bounds. Also critical is mentoring. Mentoring not only of recruits for women who we attract them and have them capable and ready on day one to be successful in the academy, but mentoring with women within the organization. With my appointment of Natalie Cortez as a commander, as a women's coordinator, and the reappointment of that significance of that position is to champion the women within our organization, those women we've promoted and the women that are already in supervisory ranks, to seek out and mentor the next generation of women within the ranks and then identify what are the obstacles, real and imagined, that are keeping them from fulfilling their dreams, whether it be in a different assignment or in a varied assignment, but in staying engaged, so that as a department, as we move forward with a 30-30 by initiative, that we're not just recruiting 30% of our recruits within this organization, but that 30% and more of our sworn workforce is made up of women. This is an issue that is not unique to Los Angeles, as we have, as you indicated, just over 18% of our workforce is women in the sworn ranks. And across American policing, that number is a dismal 12%. And when we look at the representation within the department, while we are at 28% of our recruits this last year, it is a continued headwind of challenge. So my commitment, if reappointed, is to continue on the work, the earnestness, to hold accountable those that we promote into positions of greater responsibility, that they are developing and bringing up the next generation of Los Angeles police officers and supervisors that are representative of the workforce of a city of this complexity.
Thank you, Chief. That 18% number certainly is laudable, but it hasn't changed in many years, to my recollection, at least a decade. What are the impediments to success from your perspective?
Yeah, the impediments, I think, are twofold. One, the increased level of separations that we've seen over these last few years has impacted that number, as it has our entire staffing. What I mean in plain spokenly is that officers typically we would lose 450 to 500 personnel. We're now losing in the last few years in excess of 600 personnel, and women make up a share of that as well. So we have those leaving the profession, and then at the same time, while we've increased the proportionality of women within our recruits, it hasn't been able to actually move the needle significantly. It's just kind of essentially treaded water. Internally, when we survey our women within the organization, it is the, at times, perception of culture of whether or not they have, it is a culture that's going to accept them during times such as absences due to pregnancy, reentry back into the workforce. Are they going to be sidelined, or is there going to be a penalty for the fact that they were away from the workplace, or they were in an alternative work capacity or assignment during those months or that period of time? What we are also looking at is in other agencies across the world that have a greater representation of women, that to understand how they achieve that was this idea of job sharing, or that that women and others within the organization during points of their life could go into a part-time or half-time job sharing relationship, so that they're encouraged to stay with the department and stay with us through those years and those childbearing years, and then return to the workforce in a full-time capacity as small children and young people grow up and become more independent and more self-sufficient. So that shaping an organization, make sure that the barriers are removed, artificial and real. That means mentoring, that means identifying attitudes or what appears to be a belief that people aren't qualified because of a gender issue for certain jobs, and knocking those down. It means hiring and promoting and excelling leaders who understand my expectation and our expectation that we are seeking out and identifying people who may not naturally come to a job, but we want them to come and join in and be in these more male-dominated positions, to be in these positions that are more representative of gender equality. I'm proud of the work that our captain and gang narcotics division and detective bureau has done to seek out just that. How do we find more women that have historically not sought out or been achieved a promotion or an assignment in an otherwise male-dominated portion of our organization? How do we get rid of that? How do we remove those barriers? I'm also so proud of Metropolitan Division and their outreach and engagement with women to join in what has historically been a male-dominated workforce in Metropolitan Division. And that's through both active recruitment, it's also through mentorship, and it's also by challenging the qualifications of what it means to be effective and to be selected, so that it's gender neutral.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Commissioner Briggs.
Thank you, Commissioner Decker. Commissioner Soboroff.
I've got a short statement and then Chief, 2 questions. Chief, today, as we concluded the final public comment period portion of this process, we will most likely vote on your reappointment as required by the charter of the City of Los Angeles. Commissioners have been evaluating you since you were appointed almost 5 years ago. Mayor Bass, to her credit, has prioritized meeting and communicating about your potential reappointment. Years ago, during your initial selection process, this is an understatement, you were fully vetted, and this is an understatement, you fully faced competition from numerous applicants. The commission evaluation process started formally on your first day as chief. During the years, we've interacted with you during hundreds of commission meetings, community meetings, policy discussions, via phone calls, conferences, and correspondence. We have fulfilled our obligation to adjudicate every categorical use of force incident. We've agreed with your recommendations in many circumstances, and have, with the benefit of the recommendations of the Independent Office of the Inspector General, had our disagreements as well. This word rubber stamp rings quite hollow for anybody who's been involved or somewhat neutral in this process. All of the adjudications have been reported out publicly and transparently. Chief, there have been numerous surveys, studies, after action reports that have similarly been openly discussed, publicly reported, and continue to be acted upon. Certainly, we acknowledge the inevitable changes in this board that will occur as Mayor Bass appoints her commissioners. It is important to note that there has not been one substantiated ethics violation, nor substantiated Brown Act violation in decades, and certainly no forced resignations. I want to thank the city attorney and Mr. Teefank for creating the rails and the guidelines for the actions of the police commission, including the vote on the chief, where it will occur, how it will be announced, etc. Unprecedented headwinds like the pandemic, recruitment and retention issues, the availability of cheap and deadly drugs like fentanyl, the proliferation of ghost guns, attacks on cops, homeless crisis, mental health and substance abuse effects, as well as national instances of horrific police brutality, are all to be considered in any evaluation, including yours, whether or not they occurred in your jurisdiction. Some, if not all of us, have attempted through the years to reach out to members of the total defund, total abolish, and fire everybody groups. Our message, quote, instead of calling us out, call us in. We continue and will continue that olive branch philosophy. Chief, I have two questions for you. Number one, the consent decree recommendations, as well as subsequent reports and studies, continue to guide the reforms made by the LAPD under your leadership. De-escalation, community policing, community safety partnerships, and other reforms have been implemented by you and your predecessor chiefs, Bratton and Beck, to great acclaim. However, expectations continue to change and evolve. Chief, what do you see that will be emphasized and the needs work in the upcoming months and years, and how will you lead the way? And I'll give you the second question now, and if you need me to repeat, I'll go back to first. The second question is, as you continue to require that officers and dispatchers get additional training in dealing with those experiencing homelessness, episodes of narcotic substance abuse, and are in the midst of major or minor mental health crises, we all hope that specialists will be able to handle more so that officers can handle less. What is your advice to and plan to assist those professional service providers to accomplish in order for them to collaborate, communicate, and expand so they can become the first responders in many situations instead of law enforcement? Chief?
So let me handle the first part. My promise going forward, my commitment is to lead this organization as I have in my first term, and that is to build on the community trust and build on community safety, as well as to build on officer wellness and well-being. And it is a collective effort that by not just myself, but by leadership of this commission, by Mayor Bass and elected officials that afford us the opportunities, not just with policy design and protocols and expectations, but also resources to accomplish all of those. Building community trust, in my view, is in allowing us time and affording officers the ability to be actively engaged. My commitment over the time in which we've seen one of the most dramatic drawdowns in personal staffing is my commitment to not just maintain the community safety partnership initiative, but to expand it with 2 additional sites over my tenure, and 2 additional more sites that are in front of us for 2023 as studies are being done in 2 respective communities. And as well as sharing the DNA of the Community Safety Partnership Initiative across our training, across our evaluation, how we judge police officers or evaluate, and how we encourage them for career development, so how to be more effective as whatever the respective role within this department. Additionally, with senior leads and with our local commands, even though they're much more diminished in size today than when I started 5 years ago, is that we remain committed to be highly visible and accessible, to ensure that it's not just, we're not focused on enforcement, but rather we're focused on building a community cohesion, us being a shared responsibility with them, and all of city government, all of the government agencies coming together to help support safer neighborhoods. On employee wellness, I've looked back and we've worked through one of the most trying times in our history. The loss of officers' lives, the loss of their families have never been more greater than what we've seen in the last 5 years, particularly the last 3 years with the pandemic. Their wellness, their resilience has been critical to me. Their ability to go out and do a difficult and trying job, one that is filled with uncertainty and a time of such peril. I'm proud of them. I'm proud of the work and the challenges they've met. But I'm also mindful that we have worked hard to build their resilience, to build their sense of hope and belief that their work matters. Going forward, I look forward to building on that, working with our LEPPL, our Command Officer Association, with all of our labor units to see how can we further improve their wellness, improve their center of confidence in themselves, their belief in the organization, their morale within this organization. I believe there's much more work that needs to be done there, and I'm committed to doing that. And that is critical, is because as officers feel respected internally and feel that they're working in an organization, whether it's officers or anyone with this within the range of assignments, that they have a confidence that the way they're treated is going to, I have a confidence that it'll take them into the street and they'll similarly deliver a procedural justice and a fairness. They'll be listening and they'll be actually extending a hand to support communities in need and not being seen as this totalitarian oppressor or someone who's out there trying to suppress and just by chasing, if you will, or pursuing those that are committed to committing crimes against others. Lastly, on the point of how do we help our partners in this issue of the mental health crisis that we have today in America. I believe that the mental health crisis of America must look at the job designs and the societal expectations and culture of what we allow people in that field of work to go about their day. It's as simple as this. We have far too few people who are clinicians, and we allow far too few beds for in-house and care treatment for people experiencing mental health crisis in America. It's embarrassing that we allow officers and firefighters and emergency workers to be defined as an expectation that they're always there and will work around the clock. But when it comes to mental health professionals, far too few within those professions are in job designs or in situations that they're actually available during the times in which they're needed. The psychiatric emergency teams, known as PET teams, in Los Angeles County, essentially are 5 teams across a county of 10 million people. And that is it's unfathomable, and it certainly is should not be allow anyone to be a modem of acceptance. For me, going forward, I reach across the table to talk with St. John's, Urban Alchemy, to call out providers who are making it work, who are working and finding ways through creative means of attracting a workforce, an effective workforce, to work with a public that is in desperate need of mental health counseling and services, and relieving us of the responsibility and the need for us to respond. So going forward, we know what works when we are allowed at the table, that we share together our collective will to work and find strategies that will bolster by the hundreds emergency outreach and care workers that deal with mental health issues, that deal with people in mental crises, and also have housing for them and services that keep them from getting into a spiral of crisis that ends up now being a situation where an officer is having to come into the situation and try to resolve it.
Thank you for answering the questions. I waive the rest of my time, Commissioner President.
Thank you, Commissioner Soboroff. Commissioner Kalanche.
Thank you. Chief, some of these, my 2 questions have been answered in your responses to the other commissioners, but I'm still there's nuances, I think, that merit your response. So my first one, and I'll just do both of them at the same time, and then you can answer in whatever order you wish. What is your vision for increasing diversity and women in the higher ranks of the department? Kind of dovetails a little bit with Commissioner Decker's question, and your thoughts and ideas on how you will lead and sustain culture change in the department that shifts to more of a guardian mentality and public safety that is rooted in community and relationship building, and not just CSP, but department-wide.
Well, let me first say about the diversity. I believe that my commitment to diversity, gender diversity, as well as ethnic diversity, is a day in, day out function of leadership from the top, of identifying, recognizing it, and ensuring that our not just our marketing and our talk about it. Just yesterday, we had a training session across the entire organization that we talk about the opportunities for advancement and the desire for the next generation of law enforcement, for the leaders within this organization to step up, and that there are mentors available, and to identify the mentors and ensure they have the proper training and structures so that they can be effective as we bring to them candidates that have a desire to promote, a desire to move about this department, so that we can see a gender representation at a much greater degree than we do today. As far as ethnic representation, I'm proud of the work of my tenure, that I've seen Hispanic officers at the command level increase, as well as women, as well as African Americans have remained stable, and our Asian Pacific Islander representation at the command ranks have gone up by 30%. So each of these areas are areas of improvement that are focused in a sense of understanding the gaps, identifying candidates that are capable, and approaching them and encouraging them to be prepared and take that step so that they're ready, ensuring mentors to help support them. And this includes also working effectively, whether it be with women or other diverse groups, with our employee affiliated organizations. In my tenure, we have been worked very effectively with activating those employer affiliated organizations for them having a leadership role, not just the department's leadership, but their leadership within LeLay, LEAP, OJB, Women's Peace Officer Associations, and others, that they can play a role as mentors, but also in promoting and saying to the next generation, step forward, we need you, and here's an opportunity. And if you're getting barriers, either artificial or real or perceived, how do we knock those down so that we can increase the participation across this entire organization in a way that's fair and that's equitable. Lastly, in regards to the guardianship and the mindset of an officer, there is the sixth pillar of the 21st century policing Obama report, then President Obama report, talked about officer well-being and officer wellness. And it speaks to the environment of policing that at times can be highly corrosive. It speaks about the dripping effect that it can have on an officer's heart, that can harden it, that can cause that individual to become more cynical, to lose their compassion, their belief in their human dignity, and their commitment to ensure the rights of everyone involved. So that's an environment that is a caustic one in our communities, as officers are oftentimes seeing things that no one should ever have to see, and they're traumatized and re-traumatized. So our efforts have been and from the day every academy speech I've made as a chief, is to point out to those young recruits and their families that is a circumstance in which we know we can overcome by working together, by ensuring that people talk about and have resources made available to them to talk and understand the circumstances they're exposed to, that they not fall prey to that hardening heart or that cynicism or that groupthink that ends up seeing people as an us versus them. Words matter. To have a unit we talked about a number of public sessions today about Scorpion. We don't have units like that within an organization. Those are things that we've talked about years ago, is that symbols matter. So when we use how we describe a unit, how we describe an enforcement effort or any type of public safety matter, needs to be through the lens of, is this a warrior, or is this committing like an us against them mentality, or are we working in partnership with the communities in which we serve? Now, lastly, in regards to officer wellness, it is a matter of ABLE training, the active law enforcement bystander training that we're starting this year, that all of our command officers have gone to ensure that people understand that their resilience and their well-being is often interconnected to who their partner is, and that we work collectively together as a team much better than individuals, that they're not alone. And so then when we go about our work every day, that we're engaged in training, that we're engaged in psych services and wellness and resilience, that builds an officer's heart, and that they recognize that compassion as a police officer is not a weakness, that being a guardian is not a weakness, that is truly when they are the strongest and the best representative of what the solemn oath that they've taken is meant to accomplish, which is to protect and serve. It is through my word and through our deed. And then lastly, we have to also call out. We have to name it, we have to acknowledge it, and we need to hold accountable those that violate any type of, whether it be racism, discrimination, where they believe that it is an us against them mentality. We have to, extremist views cannot be allowed to exist under some guise that, well, it's a First Amendment right. These views that call out those types of despicable remarks or values, if we wouldn't hire a person today with those values, they shouldn't maintain a position in this department with those values. And it is an organizational responsibility, and one that some of the toughest and yet right calls that I've made is that when people have broken their oath and expressed racist views, homophobic views, sexist views, or actions, that they're held accountable for that, that they no longer have the privilege to wear this badge. An organization should never be, and I'll close, should never be governed by just the consequences of people making mistakes being some harsh disciplinary matter. It needs to be done in a positive way and a productive way, but there is a role for accountability and for the fact that there's consequences when people break the norms of our culture and our society.
Chief, just a quick follow-up. Have you thought about practices to help kind of create that? I mean, there's a disconnect, or there's a large distance between like you and then the officer on the street that's patrolling. So how do you minimize that gap so that what you're saying here really trickles down to those officers that are out interacting with the public?
So, well, there's no one channel. This is in any complex system, you have to have multiple strategies, and it's one that it also occurs here. I have to ensure that the personnel that I select, the people I choose for promotion and upgrades, are reflective of the values that I hold. Then those values should be uniform with the department's values. And how are they expressing those views, and how are they reinforcing this? And so it's not just my message. It's not just the chief's message on my monthly videos, or when I stop by at a field encounter, or I stop and see a squad of officers that are at a roll call break. It's not just the one-on-ones in those instances, but it's also that is being amplified and repeated frequently throughout the entire organization at all of the levels. It's having systems in place that demonstrate the adherence to that concept, that meetings that are held in supervisors meetings that are held in roll call, that it's not just the chief's message, but it's our training and our training bulletins and the structures that we use, the systems of measurements that go to demonstrate that you can expect what you inspect, and people will engage in the activities that you measure when you recognize those activities are being measured. And so the negative sanctions and the negative outcomes, you can't shy away from those. When there are hardline decisions that have to be made because the buck stops here and we're not going to allow this type of conduct to exist, you've got to be vocal about it, and you can't shy away from it. And we need to, those are processes that I expect that are done. I monitor that. I have feedback loops throughout the organization of people circling back to me. Sometimes I hear affirmation, other times I hear crickets. I hear that's not the word that you're saying, Chief, is not getting down to the officer on the street, or is not being seen in a roll call room, or is not being represented by an officer's actions in the field. And so that is a vigilance on my part, and looking through the system of our training, looking through the system of our selections, looking at our promotions, and looking at how we model not just it in word, but in deed, so that we demonstrate that uniformity and what are the expectations. And I'll close by saying it goes to a conversation I had on Saturday at headquarters downstairs with officers that were holding back because of concerns about protest activities that would match the night before. And to every person there, I came in and I thanked them for being here to protect this building. And I also was proud of them and reminded them that when they stood for this department, and every action and deed that they engaged in was going to be reflective of everyone of this organization, and how proud I was of them, because I had every confidence they would go out and act in that manner. So it's an affirmation in the positive, and not just simply the condemnation of those individuals that would fall short.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Commissioner Kalanche. Commissioner Bonner.
Thank you very much. Chief, there's a lot that we could and should be talking about this morning, but we have 12 minutes. So I'm going to, first, I'm just going to go ahead and say that, there's, for a lot of the reasons we've talked about in many of our conversations in the past few weeks, I'm inclined to support your reappointment, in part because I believe you've, all things considered, you've been effective in providing the steady leadership to the department during some very unprecedented and challenging times. And I believe you've been earnest in your efforts to move the department in a better direction. And there's some other factors that I could mention that, both things we agree on and probably don't agree on, but that's essentially what it boils down to. And so I want to talk a little bit about at least one thing you've identified in your the package that you submitted to support your reappointment. You talked about some past accomplishments, but also looking forward at some of the work to be done. And so I'm going to just take a couple minutes to kind of put in context my two questions, really. And they relate to your one of your priorities in the second term, which is to see further reductions in the use of force. And I know there's been a lot of discussion, appropriately so, about accountability and the response to incidents of excessive force. But I'm focused really on the front end of how we can prevent and further reduce incidents of force. And particularly as it relates to use of force in underserved communities, I think that I continue to believe that mindset matters, and I would argue probably more so than some of the policies and procedures that we have worked on. And that's why, we have worked together over the years to make sure that new officers coming out of the academy have more awareness and understanding of the good and the bad history of LAPD in certain communities. It's why more recently we're working on to reconsider the way the department reports on and tracks race in the context of crime data and other reports. It's why I believe, and I continue to say that I think you need a new approach to assessing allegations of bias, and also why I continue to invest more time with understanding the mindset of new supervisors and how they're coming into the field, because I believe they're best suited to influence the quality of policing in neighborhoods. And so when we think about the goal to further reduce force, to achieve that, I think in your second term in particular, and probably starting immediately, that we need to undertake a much deeper dive, looking at both the impact and the limitations of many of the recent reforms, so that we can better identify and understand where those opportunities are to improve. And in particular, what I'm looking for is your public commitment to undertake this assessment and better understand some of the human elements, human factors that can influence both the behavior of officers and the people they encounter, and in situations that sometimes lead to excessive force. Even with some of the policies on body worn, video, de-escalation, pretextual stops, the duty to intervene, and some of the others that have produced some good results and hold some promise, but they're not in some ways a panacea. And I should also say clearly, there's still too many cases and situations that do require officers to go hands-on. So I don't want to suggest that every incident in which force is used is inappropriate. We're really focused on what we can do to further reduce those incidents and also improve the quality of service. So, I'm thinking of how closely we're looking at what I've referred to as some of the human factors that can influence the behavior of officers and the public, including the morale and mindset of the workforce. That's come up a couple times today. How we're tracking and reporting on crime, and can we be more careful in not equating race and criminality. I raised that issue in connection with the last use of force report, and we've been doing some work on that since then. The potential for groupthink, I raised this last week, and since I heard Chief Davis use the term, I'll use it as well. What do we know really about the potential for groupthink that can undermine efforts to empathize and de-escalate as appropriate? I've also raised in some of our closed session cases, that I think we do need to understand better how law enforcement understands and defines what it means to resist arrest in some of these cases, and whether the tactics do adequately account for what I see as sometimes the instinctive fight or flight reaction to some of these cases. I'm not painting a broad brush. I'm saying these are areas, in my opinion, that need to be rethought or looked at to better understand, including the importance of supervisors and how they exercise the command and control, and are they getting enough support in that effort. And then finally, you've mentioned a couple times the ABLE training, and I do think we need to understand what is the true promise and potential of that to empower officers to improve on all the above these kinds of issues. And so my two questions to you really are, I know that these issues and items can all be framed in different ways by different people at different times. But the first question, I'll just throw both of them out there. The first question is, what have I left off the list? or what would you add to the list? What am I, and then also whatever the list proves to be, what I would like you to speak directly to is, what is your commitment to giving these and other, what I'm calling human factors, greater attention going forward? And how will that commitment be manifest so the public knows that these and related issues are getting the sufficient attention that they deserve?
Well, thank you. And thank you for your earlier remarks of your inclination, if you will. As to your question, my commitment is to the complexities of what you've just described are multiple factors. What I am encouraged as I look back over the last 4+ years, is that some of the items you've talked about, policy changes, training, added tools, expectations, and accountability, we've all engaged in. The commission's leadership, as far as use of force, but also policy designs and the monitoring, the oversight, the Inspector General's work in ensuring that it's not just the chief coming to you with reports on how we're making progress and how the evolution of policing here in Los Angeles is leading the country on an imperfect work of policing, and the challenges that are there, some of them of our own making, but many of them outside of our control. I'm encouraged that we see that progress, but we're not there yet, and we're not done. And my commitment is to remain committed to that, to keep going at this, to have an optimism that we can continue to see the evolution of policing, to improve where we'll see communities that trust us at a greater level, though we've seen improvements in just the last 2 years, that we can see further improvements through the delivery of policing in a way that builds trust, that improves community safety, that is transparent, and as appropriate, accountable to when we fall short, whether it be as an individual or as an organization. That is a never-ending task. It is something that I define as an organization, we define with our strategic plan that calls out our specific goals and then the measures of how we're going about it. Now, you've talked about the importance of first-line supervisors. And so let me talk about just briefly how we go about that. Active leadership means that not just training and teaching and giving them real-world experience with this, but when it falls short is calling it out and calling out what active leadership is and what it isn't. When we talk about active law enforcement bystander training, what is it? It's about dealing with first-line supervisors to one point where people have a natural inclination not to engage, to get involved in a group think. No one really wants to do what's being done, but no one wants to be the first to say no. And so one or more individuals goes down a path that others get caught up in, and they go down in this group think. And at the end, they look back and they're embarrassed or ashamed because of what they didn't do by acting as they should have. The active law enforcement bystander training, which I want to thank Commissioner Briggs for bringing that to the department. I want to thank the Los Angeles Police Foundation for funding our ability to actually deliver this important training, is going to reinforce the standing expectation that we watch out for each other, that 2 minds are better than 1 in our team effort of when we approach a situation, and that people have the ability to offer and intercede to ensure that the best outcomes are sought. And that generally means time, cover, patience, looking for alternatives, and finding ways in which to avoid having to escalate a situation or avoid seeing an individual get hurt or someone else suffer some type of injury because a situation just spiraled out of control. So I look at our work and going forward, my commitment is to demonstrate the transparency I've demonstrated as chief, whether it be through when situations that I find need to be defended or situations that we need to own and acknowledge that we fell short. To ensure accountability, whenever exercising the powers that I have as a chief, and ensuring that when people have fallen short, that we're trained whenever possible, but also disciplined as necessary, while also supporting the mayor and the city council and this commission, in whatever form it's in, to see what other reforms, working with our labor unions, so that the system is fair and the system meets the public's expectations, that it's going to hold officers accountable when they fall short. Lastly, we're forever committed to finding new ways by listening and looking elsewhere to understand how are people approaching challenging circumstances and how can we improve our resilience and our ability to deal with these in innovation and finding new ideas that, or even previously dismissed ideas that we need to revisit because it's finding success somewhere else across this great landscape of America.
Well, thank you very much for that, Chief. And I would just reiterate again, obviously 12 minutes is not enough to really do justice to the seriousness of these issues. And so what I've just tried to do simply is draw some attention to some of the issues that I hope and fully expect to continue addressing with you going forward in a second term. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bonner. Thank you, Chief Moore. At this time, the board will recess into closed session to consider the reappointment of Chief Moore. Thank you.
The Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss agenda items 5 and 6A and B in accordance with Government Code 54957.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Ink. We have concluded closed session. At this time, all members of the commission are present. Secretary is present. Can you read out from closed session, Mr. Chief Ink, please?
Yes, Mr. President. Item 6A, 1 and 2 were continued to February 7th. Relates to item 6B. There was a motion and a vote to approve the reappointment of the chief of police for a second 5-year term, and that motion passed unanimously. That's the report out, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Ink. Chief Moore, I want to congratulate you on gaining the confidence of the commission and moving forward. We look forward to working with you and in instituting some of the reforms that we look forward to seeing you implement some of the things that we've discussed here today and in the past. And we look forward to ensuring that our city is safe, both from the crime that we've seen now that is being reduced, but also from actions that would harm our own department. And so to that extent, I want to thank you for what you've done and look forward to working with you in these coming years. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. If I might, for a moment, no, okay?
Yes. Oh, no, no, okay. So if that's the case, then at this time, there being no further business before the board, I move that we adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Most have been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone. Look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you. Take care.